Chapter 611, The Greatest Form of Respect. Wang Teng possessed the ultimate stage of lightning force. When he broke through the Brigadier General stage, the lightning force shot through his spine, forming a bridge that connected heaven and earth. All the lightning force in his surroundings was summoned by him and entered his body. The lightning enveloped him and danced wildly. Everyone looked at the figure hovering in the sky with thick shock in their eyes. Wang Teng was actually a lightning element martial warrior. Also, he had a breakthrough in the middle of a battle and had reached the Brigadier General stage. A breakthrough in the middle of a fight, and he even managed to do it while being suppressed by Xuan's lightning force. What a talent! At the large Eagle Nation's side, Arnold's eyes were shaking as he exclaimed, "This guy!" Gerald stared closely at Wang Teng. His heart was filled with frustration. He was hailed by others as a talent and enjoyed great honor in the large Eagle Nation. However, this exchange event taught him that there was always someone who would be stronger than him. Country Shia's Wang Ting was undoubtedly better and more outstanding than him. On Country Boar's side, Darwin's gaze kept flickering. He took a deep breath and said, "Country Shia is always able to produce such unexpected talents. How enviable. The man I chose is indeed an excellent one." Valeria snickered. That Barbie-like face revealed a hint of cuteness. He's a double-element martial warrior. His fire force has already reached the Brigadier General stage and is on par with Xuan. Now that his lightning force has reached that stage as well, I'm afraid Xuan can no longer match up to him, Darwin said. Even if he hadn't broken through, Xuan would still be unable to match up to Wang Teng. He hasn't even used any skills of a divine spirit master, Valeria nodded and said. At the same time, talents from Country Inca, Country Fire, Country Neon, and the other countries were all discussing amongst themselves. It seemed as though they were trying to get the shock out of their chests. As geniuses, they had their own pride, but with the talent that Wang Ting had displayed at this moment, they had to admit that this person seemed better than them, by a bit. Yes, only by a bit. They wouldn't admit to anything more than that. Yoke's face was turning dark over at the White Eagle Nation's side. He felt that Wang Ting was their country's nemesis. Time and time again, he had opposed them. Beating Fortes into a pulp was still acceptable as, after all, he wasn't the strongest martial warrior on their team. It was just a loss, the worst was just an embarrassment. But Xuan was different. He was their trump card for this exchange event. If Xuan was defeated in the hands of Country Shia, it would mean that their progress in this year's exchange event would end here. Wang Ting would become the wall that they couldn't climb over. If you have problems with this website, please continue reading your novel on our new website myboxnovel.com. Thanks. What were those martial warriors doing when they were gathering intelligence? Country Shia had such great talent, and they didn't even send us any information about him. Yoke cursed their families in his heart. If they knew about Wang Ting's existence, they would have at least made some preparations. They were caught completely off guard. However, he didn't know that Wang Ting's rise was a sudden and short one. People had paid attention during the National Martial Arts competition, but it was only a competition for soldier-level warriors. It was leagues away from this exchange event, and no one felt that Wang Ting would be able to participate in the exchange event then. Afterward, the Sea Beasts riot happened in Donghai, and Wang Teng came into prominence in that incident, finally catching the attention of the intelligence officers. But it was too late. Country Shia was extremely protective of their talents, and many intelligence officers were killed before they could even get the word out. Besides, in this age, the countries were separated by the oceans, and powerful star beasts were lurking in nature, making communication even more difficult. That was why the White Eagle Nation didn't receive the information in time. At this moment, everyone in Country Shia found it hard to believe as well. Many of them were unaware that Wang Teng possessed lightning force, and then they suddenly saw his breakthrough to the Brigadier General stage, leaving them absolutely dumbfounded. Even Dan Taixian didn't expect Wang Ting's lightning force to have reached this level. Her heart was filled with emotions. This fellow was a monster. Ji Xiuming, Luo Cheng, and the rest opened their eyes wide. They already knew that Wang Ting's 5 elemental forces had already reached the Brigadier General stage. But now, why did the lightning force suddenly appear? How many elemental forces did this guy have? Everyone found it unbelievable, and some couldn't even accept the fact. In the future, if anyone dared to say that they were a talent, they would fight him. In front of that monster Wang Ting, who would be considered a talent? Ren Qingtsang was bursting from within. Lightning force was a mutated element force. It was powerful and rare for people to possess it. That was why he was always proud of his lightning force. Now, his biggest opponent had displayed lightning force, and he had even reached the Brigadier General stage, far surpassing him. How on earth could he ever catch up to him? Ren Qingkang's frame of mind was shattered, and he wanted to swear. He felt that God was unfair. Why was Wang Ting so powerful and talented? It was like all the talents in the world were combined into one. How was it possible for a person like that to exist? Jealousy had been building up in his heart for some time now. Since the sea beast's riot, he had been suppressing it deep in his heart. Now, he was raging again. Jealousy was causing him to break apart. In the Colosseum, Xuan's eyes were fixed on Wang Ting. He was frantically grasping his lightning force, trying to regain control of it. However, things backfired. The lightning force within several hundreds of meters of him didn't react accordingly, instead all gathering towards Wang Ting. Despair. Xuan's face was pale. He felt like he was abandoned by the world. Injustice. He felt like crying. Bathed in lightning, Wang Ting smiled. Stop struggling meaninglessly. It's useless. I don't believe it. I'm already a low-tier general stage martial warrior, and you have just reached the Brigadier General stage. You are only making use of this opportunity to control the surrounding lightning force temporarily. It won't be long before everything returns to normal. Xuan sneered. His face wasn't looking good, but he didn't lose his mind yet. Haha. Wang Ting thought that this guy wasn't stupid, but it was a pity that his opponent had underestimated him. Now that he had reached the general stage, Wang Ting didn't intend to waste any more time. As lightning flashed around his body, he bolted straight towards Xuan. As a lightning force martial warrior, I'll show you the greatest form of respect by defeating you with lightning force. Wang Ting appeared in front of Xuan in an instant and swiped Mo Q that was on his shoulders outwards, bringing along the unrivaled power of lightning. Boom! The lightning burst, and as Mo Q slashed downwards, it turned into a terrifying blade glow, penetrating the ground. Xuan was horrified. At this time, he couldn't even think about resisting. He quickly stepped back and tried to get out of the range of the blade glow, but it was too late. Chapter 6:12. Enough to defeat you. No. Xuan screamed. His face was pale as he stood amidst the bolts of lightning, with the purple blade glow slashing down on him. However, his roar was overlapped by a huge explosion. Boom! Lightning struck down and slammed on his body. Flashes of lightning danced crazily in the sky. Sparks flew everywhere and silver-purple glows covered up the entire area where the two martial warriors were. Everyone squinted as they watched the battle reach the climax, not daring to blink. Boom! Suddenly, a figure fell from the glaring ball of light. It was headed straight for the ground. Bang! Along with a dull thud, the figure smashed into the ground. A bolt of lightning struck him thereafter and pushed the person a long distance away. Cracks had started to appear on the hard stage. There were even burnt marks at the edges of the cracks. The Colosseum turned eerily silent. Xuan lost. When Wang Ting's lightning force entered the Brigadier General stage, many people had predicted this ending. Still, witnessing the scene personally, the feeling was entirely different. Also, that attack from Wang Ting seemed outrageously powerful. If they didn't see it firsthand, they might have suspected that Wang Ting wasn't at the Brigadier General stage. Instead, he had advanced to the low-tier general stage. This was unbelievable. What breed of monster was he? Yoke's face turned black like the bottom of the pan. He looked at Xuan, who was lying on the ground in a miserable state. The muscles on his face twitched uncontrollably. Marcia, Fortes, and the others were silent. In the sky, the bolts of lightning dispersed, revealing Wang Ting's figure. The lightning force on his body dissipated slowly, leaving only some sparks dancing between his hair. There was lightning flashing in his eyes. He looked down at Xuan, his gaze as calm as ever. It was as if he had just done something small and unimportant, something that wasn't defeating a talent from a big nation. Marcia and the others looked at him. For some reason, they felt fear creeping up their hearts. Forte's face turned green when he remembered how he had provoked Wang Ting in the past. If he knew this young man was a devil, he wouldn't have been so irritating. If you have problems with this website, please continue reading your novel on our new website myboxnovel.com. Thanks. Please don't look for me. Please don't look for me. Fortes kept praying to his god in his heart. Although Xuan was badly injured, he didn't lose consciousness. He crawled up with difficulty and stared indignantly at Wang Ting. He was unwilling to admit defeat. He was a genius. How could he lose? Wang Ting lowered his head and looked at him. He said indifferently, "Even if I have just advanced to the Brigadier General stage, it's enough to defeat you." Splurt. Anger burned in his heart when Xuan heard this. He vomited a mouthful of blood. For a genius like him, this kind of defeat was a great blow. Furthermore, he met this irritating man, Wang Ting. Not only did he defeat him, but he also stabbed him with his sharp words. Wang Ting didn't plan to stimulate him, though. He just wanted to put on an act. A good start must be followed by a good ending. After all, Xuan had worked so hard to cooperate with him. It would be inappropriate of him not to express some gratitude. Cough. The high priest couldn't stand it anymore. He hurriedly opened his mouth. Country Shia has won. The instant the result came out, the people from Country Shia regained their senses. A huge cheer erupted. The competition to emerge as the more powerful nation between the White Eagle Nation and Country Shia had always been fierce. In the current era, martial warriors represented the hard power of a certain nation to a large extent. This exchange event was an avenue for martial warriors from different nations to compete against one another. In the past, Country Shia lost most of the time and only had a few wins. They hadn't beaten the White Eagle Nation in 3 years. Wang Ting's victory allowed Country Shia to vent their frustrations over the past few years. Dan Taixian glanced in the White Eagle Nation's direction. When she saw Yoke's black face, she smiled uncontrollably. She had always found it a regret to lose to the martial warriors from the White Eagle Nation. Today, Wang Ting helped her fulfill her wish. This was worth celebrating. If this piece of news spread back to their nation, all the martial warriors in their country would be overjoyed. The match ended. No matter how unwilling they were, the result couldn't be changed. Yoke stepped into the arena. This time, he didn't exchange words with Wang Ting. He held Xuan silently and walked down the arena. Wang Ting looked at their back views. Although Yoke hid it well, he still caught the sinister glint in his eyes. This fellow must be furious. He laughed secretly in his heart. Then, he retracted his gaze and swept the attribute bubbles scattered in the arena over with his spiritual power. Lightning Force *220 Laytang Battle Conscious *165 Lightning Force *180 Lightning Force *280 Ultimate Stage Lightning Talent *50 Spiritual Realm Enlightenment *60 Spiritual Realm Spirit *85 Wang Ting's eyes lit up. This was a good haul, as expected of a talent. Look at what he dropped. There were Spiritual Realm Spirit and Enlightenment, Ultimate Stage Lightning Talent, Laytang Battle Conscious. Wang Ting's lightning talent was already at the ultimate stage. With the additional 50 points, his lightning talent jumped a little. Ultimate stage lightning talent, 1055,000. He had 120 points of Laytang Battle Conscious already. Adding 165 more points to it, he had 285 in total. Laytang Battle Conscious, 285 1000, first level. During the battle with Xuan, Wang Ting had used this Laytang Battle Conscious, so he knew its advantages. In summary, when he used it, he was the king of all the lightning nearby. It was able to increase the attacking power of his lightning attacks to a certain degree. The Laytang Battle Conscious played its part in the last attack he had used to defeat Xuan. The remaining bubbles were lightning force attributes. He had picked up some during the battle, and it helped him step into the Brigadier General stage. Now, he had gained 680 additional points. A new stream of lightning force merged with the lightning force in his body, calming the restless forces in his body gradually. Lightning force, 8-20-10,000, 10-star, Wang Teng was satisfied. One of his forces grew to the Brigadier General stage after he fought one match. If it was possible, he hoped to have more good chances like this. He returned to the spectators' stand, welcomed by his excited companions. Amazing. Zhu Yushao punched his chest forcefully. She laughed and said, "This time, the martial warriors from the White Eagle Nation won't dare to tease us anymore. We're fortunate to have you. If not, we wouldn't have been able to beat Xuan," Mu Zhigua lamented. "I feel embarrassed by all your compliments." Wang Teng chuckled. Everyone rolled their eyes. "How could you feel embarrassed with that thick skin of yours? Do you believe what you've said? You have made contributions to the country." Dan Taixian glanced at him and said, "Is there a reward?" Wang Teng's eyes shone. "You have the Queen Phoenix battlecraft already. What other rewards do you want?" Dan Taixian replied angrily. Queen Phoenix battlecraft. The team recalled the promise made by the three great commanders before they left the country. As long as Wang Teng defeated the talents from the other nations, they would reward him with a Queen Phoenix battlecraft. At that time, no one believed it. Yet, Wang Teng had defeated the ultimate talent from the White Eagle Nation, and there weren't many martial warriors from other countries who could be his opponent. Hence, it seemed highly likely that he would get the Queen Phoenix battlecraft. Chapter 6:13. You can only be more despicable. Queen Phoenix battlecraft. As a soldier, Mu Zhigua and the other military soldiers yearned deeply for these large-sized toys. Unfortunately, they knew that it was close to impossible to get the most advanced aircraft for their own personal usage. They didn't expect Wang Ting to have this right. How much hope did they have in him? Zhu Yushao, Chu Fei, and the others were green with envy. You could imagine how jealous they were. But they knew that if they were given the chance, they might not be able to grasp it. Ji Xiuming, Luo Cheng, and the other students were also envious. They couldn't resist the temptation of a Queen Phoenix battlecraft either. After all, as young people, all of them had the thought of being in the limelight and having the chance to boast in front of everyone. In an instant, they felt the distance between Wang Teng and them. It seemed as large as the universe. He was preparing to fly, but they were still playing house on the ground. Why couldn't humans be equal? Why was there a difference? Why was reality so cruel? At this moment, these talents felt the same helplessness and dejectedness normal people felt when facing them. Dan Taixian looked at their expressions and felt guilty for some reason. Although she had mentioned it casually, it gave everyone a huge blow. It was all Wang Ting's fault. Why did he mention the words reward? It was his fault. Dan Taixian glared at him. Wang Ting was speechless. He knew what Dan Taixian was thinking. The competition continued. A martial warrior from North Country Star came out and wanted to challenge Marsha from the White Eagle Nation. Yoke turned grim. He said to Marsha, "You mustn't lose this match." It was almost an order. The White Eagle Nation was in a tragic situation. Xuan, who was their trump card, was badly beaten. They had no other paths of retreat. Even if Marsha won this match, nothing would change. But she couldn't lose. Her defeat would only put the White Eagle Nation in an even worse situation. Yoke wanted to protect what was left of the White Eagle Nation's reputation. Marsha understood this point. Her expression serious, she nodded and stepped into the arena. If you have problems with this website, please continue reading your novel on our new website myboxnovel.com. Thanks. Wang Ting's gaze was instantly attracted to the match. Two beautiful ladies. He had seen Marsha before. Her figure was amazing, and her curly hair made her even more attractive. He had to admit that these foreign beauties had wonderful figures. An average man wouldn't be able to handle them. Only someone with a powerful body like him could withstand the pressure. The martial warrior from North Country Star was not bad either. She had golden hair and green eyes. Her skin was fair, and her legs were long, straight, and plump. She was curvy, tight, and filled with elasticity. Dan Taixian saw his shining gaze and rolled her eyes at him. She said unhappily, "Can you have some standard? What's so nice about those foreigners?" Cough. examining their flaws critically. Not looking at beauties. Not that kind of person. Wang Ting pursed his lips and said in a righteous tone. Shameless. His companions looked at him in contempt. No one believed his lies. After interacting for some time, they understood Wang Teng's personality. This fellow was an irritating person who didn't have any face value. As the saying went, there was always someone better than you and someone more despicable than you. These were all true for Wang Teng. The match had already started in the arena. Marsha and the female martial warrior from North Country Star rushed towards each other as they released their forces. Boom! A battle erupted instantly. An almost unnoticeable hint of seriousness flashed past Wang Ting's eyes when the battle started officially. Both of them were strong, and their outstanding appearance added points for them. The other martial warriors were watching the match with interest. After all, beautiful people were always a feast for the eye. It was rare to see two pretty ladies fighting. Boom, boom, boom. Marsha and the martial warrior from North Country Star attacked each other and created loud explosions. Marsha was using a pair of claws as her weapons. They were exceptionally sharp. Along with her metal force, lines of bright golden light slashed through the air, almost ripping the space apart because of its sharpness. The female martial warrior from North Country Star had a short sword. It was covered with fire force as it knocked against Marsha's sharp claws. They shuttled around the arena, turning into lingering shadows as they chased each other and collided continuously. Sometimes, the residual impact of the force explosions would spread through the arena. Marsha seemed a little solemn. Her gaze was ruthless as she stared at her opponent in the distance. Boom! Her body started changing without any warning. A layer of light black fur grew out from her skin. However, it didn't seem as coarse as Kuhn's fur. Instead, it felt thin and soft. Her ears turned sharp and fur grew on them too. A long black tail grew out from behind her. It waved in the air. The female martial warrior opposite her turned grave when she saw this scene. She clutched the short sword tightly in her hand and prepared herself for the upcoming challenge. Marsha smiled. She took off the sharp claws. In their place, long and sharp nails grew out from her hands. They gave off a metallic glint as they gleamed coldly under the light. Wang Ting stared at her in astonishment. Oh my God, Catwoman. He was honestly amazed. He knew that Marsha might be a Gene martial warrior too, but he didn't expect her animal to be a cat. Though her appearance seemed a little, cough, Wang Ting touched his chin and hurriedly shook the indecent thoughts out of his head. Marsha's gene mutation seems to be of a higher tier than the rest, Dan Taixian suddenly said. Her gaze was fixed on Marsha. Wang Ting glanced at her involuntarily before turning to study Marsha. He understood what Dan Taixian meant. No wonder he felt a little strange just now. Marsha's eyes were clear. The changes in her body weren't as significant as Kuhn's or Fortess. Only a few noticeable traits could be seen. This proved that Marsha's gene mutation level was high. Yes, she looks better than the other martial warriors from the White Eagle Nation. Look at that tail and her ears. Wang Ting nodded and commented. Incongruous. Shut up. Dan Taixian took a deep breath to suppress the urge to pin Wang Ting on the ground and beat him up. In the arena, Marsha suddenly moved. She turned into a flash of black shadow and disappeared on the spot. Fast. The martial warrior from North Country Star squinted her eyes. She turned her body to search for Marsha. Stab. The moment she had this thought, a cold flash of light appeared behind her back, slashing her battle uniform. A few drops of blood splattered on the ground. Ouch! The female martial warrior groaned in pain. She turned around and waved her short sword. Unfortunately, Marsha was already gone. Chapter 614. The Battle Between the Kings. After Marsha vanished without a trace, the next instant, she appeared at the female martial warrior's blind spot and clawed at her. Ah! The female martial warrior from North Country Star shrieked in agony. Anyone who heard her screams would tear up for her. Marsha is so vicious. The young lady is quite pretty. Why does she have to leave so many wounds on her body? It will be ugly if they turn into scars. Wang Ting shook his head. He found it a little unbearable. Everyone. The expression on his teammates' faces collapsed when they heard Wang Teng's comment. Come on, they were watching the match seriously. Can you shut your mouth? How was Wang Ting able to make everything sound strange? This fellow must be doing it on purpose. Please, be a human. Everyone was exasperated. They stared at Wang Ting until he felt goosebumps all over. He decided to keep quiet. In the arena, the fight had reached its climax. If you have problems with this website, please continue reading your novel on our new website myboxnovel.com. Thanks. To others, Marsha had turned into lines of dark shadows. She flashed around her opponent at high speed, clawing the female martial warrior until she had no chance of resisting. Marsha's speed increased exponentially after her mutation. Her body was extremely agile. The female martial warrior from North Country Star couldn't keep up with her. Bang! In the end, the female martial warrior from North Country Star couldn't withstand the onslaught and flew out from one of Marsha's claws. She slammed onto the ground heavily. White Eagle Nation wins. The high priest announced the result. What a poor little thing. The female martial warrior was covered with wounds. Fresh blood stained her clothes. It was a terrible sight. Her battle uniform hung on her like rags, revealing some parts of her body. Fortunately, the blood covered her up, so nothing could be seen. What a vicious lady. Wang Ting clicked his tongue as the match came to an end. He looked at Marsha with a hint of fear in his eyes. A bad woman wasn't scary. A ruthless woman was. Yes, this was a lady he mustn't provoke. Come on, imagine sharp claws growing out from her hands when you were having an intimate time with her. What if she clawed his? That cold touch, that bloody scene. Wang Ting shivered. He didn't dare to think further. He looked at the arena and wanted to pick up the attribute bubbles. Coincidentally, Marsha was looking in his direction. She seemed to notice his gaze and instantly licked her lips. Her gaze turned seductive. Oh my God! Demon, don't you dare to tempt me. Wang Ting was bellowing in his heart, but he remained calm on the surface and silently picked up the attribute bubbles. Then, he shifted his gaze away nonchalantly. Metal Force *565 Origin of Life *1 Spiritual Realm Spirit *45 Spiritual Realm Enlightenment *60 Fire Force *540 Advanced Stage Fire Talent *36 Spiritual Realm Spirit *38 Spiritual Realm Enlightenment *54 Wang Ting shuddered. This felt so invigorating. A comfortable moment for every 1 point of origin of life. How good could it get? The only hard part was suppressing himself. At this moment, his expression was indescribable. After this one, there were another 2 matches. Wang Ting noticed that no more outstanding martial warriors came out. The top-tier martial warriors from every country had already made their appearance. This was the last stage of the competition, so no countries would hold back. If they didn't send their talented martial warriors out now, there would be no more chances. They would be returning home soon. The competition is ending. Aren't you going to take the initiative to challenge someone? Dan Taixian asked when she saw his silence. Wang Ting hesitated. Then, he nodded and said, since I'm here, I should go down and have some fun. I should finish what the 3 old men asked me to do. He stood up and stretched his back. Then, he walked into the arena. Don't lose. You won't get your Queen Phoenix battlecraft if you do, Dan Taixian said. Wang Ting waved his hand without turning back. He stepped on the arena. The expressions of the martial warriors from the other countries became stern. Wang Ting, this fellow again. He had just defeated Xuan from White Eagle Nation, and he was coming down again? The battle between the top-class talents would exhaust considerable force. Some might even use up all their force, so they would need to get ample rest before starting their next match. Normally, no one would start a new match in haste. However, Wang Ting was looking for another fight after a short moment of rest. Had he already recovered? Many people were puzzled. At the same time, they found it unbelievable. Wang Ting arrived at the center of the Colosseum and scanned the crowd. Many people evaded his gaze. They didn't dare to look straight at him, afraid that he would notice them. Wang Ting smiled. His gaze paused in Country Inca's direction. Wang Ting from Country Shia, I would like to challenge Country Inca. His voice spread out slowly. Although not loud, it was resolute. One Agliro was a martial warrior that had caught Wang Ting's interest. Constellation Force. Agliro had Constellation Force. If he didn't get attribute bubbles from him, who else could he choose? There was nothing wrong with this thinking. The martial warriors from Country Inca were stunned. Only Agliro remained calm. He glanced at Wang Ting indifferently before walking into the arena. Please. Agliro placed his palms together. When he put them down, he was already holding an iron rod. Wang Ting took out his Mo Q. This giant weapon had grabbed many people's attention. It was rare to see a weapon that looked like a sword and a blade. What a flashy piece of equipment. Who do you think will win this match? Arnold asked Gerald. Agliro. Gerald pondered for a moment before replying. Huh. Arnold was surprised. I thought you would say Wang Ting. Agliro gives me a different feeling. He's very mysterious, Gerald said. You're right. However, Wang Ting gives me a different feeling too. The battle between these two will be very interesting. Arnold smiled. The same conversation was happening between all the martial warriors from different countries. Wang Ting and Agliro. This was a match between the kings. It was hard to predict who would emerge victorious. The two martial warriors stared straight at each other. The atmosphere turned tense. Start. The second the high priest finished speaking, the two of them disappeared. They were charging towards each other at the speed of lightning. Boom. Wang Ting held Mo Q and chopped it down like a huge axe. Terrifying energy erupted. Clang. Agliro raised the iron rod in his hand and blocked the attack. However, the next moment, his expression changed slightly. He felt a daunting force pressing down on him. His body went a little lower uncontrollably. The force of this attack was appalling. He felt that he had underestimated his opponent. The guy was stronger than his initial estimates. Wang Ting smiled at him. He twisted his body at a weird angle and swept his leg over, aiming directly at his opponent's temple. His attacks were simple, direct, and ruthless. Wang Ting didn't hold back, using the most brutal attack at once. Each of his moves was fatal, and he refused to show any mercy. Agliro raised his arm in a hurry and blocked Wang Ting's kick with his elbow. But he was still forced to retreat more than 10 meters. His feet rubbed against the ground and formed a long black abrasion mark. Formidable. The Colosseum was silent. Chapter 6:15, Venerable. Come and play. Wang Ting was never afraid of close combat. He had multiple strong physiques, like the Lei Tang physique, ancient god's body, and many other powerful scriptures. At his stage, no other martial warriors were his match. This was why he could jump ranks and fight with world-class talents like Agliro and Xuan without being at a disadvantage. There was nothing to doubt about his power. Agliro flew a long distance back from Wang Ting's kick. After stopping, his gaze turned serious. He could still feel the dull pain on his arm because of the strength of that kick just now. Even his bones were impacted by the kick. If he hadn't used his force to protect his bones, if his force hadn't absorbed most of the strength invading his body, his bones might have broken on the spot. Agliro flicked his sleeve. Using a fence as a form of defense, he stepped on the ground. Boom. The ground shattered as cracks spread out from the center. A strong force spread out. Agliro had disappeared. He was charging towards Wang Ting. Crimson flames erupted from his body and engulfed him. Wherever he went, there was a long trail of flames behind him. It looked like a fire dragon. Scorching heat swept through the arena. Wang Ting felt the searing air boring down on him from afar. The hot wind blew past his cheeks. Agliro appeared in an instant. He released his fist and attacked Wang Ting's head. Boom. The flaming fists were extremely powerful. The air around them exploded, and heat waves were seen spreading through the air from the center, flowing out into their surroundings. An ordinary martial warrior would get injured if these flames touched their bodies. After all, Agliro's flame wasn't an ordinary fire force. It was the Constellation Force, many times more powerful than the ordinary fire force. However, these flames were unable to hurt Wang Ting. Not only did he possess the fire element constellation force, but he also had the emerald glazed flame protecting him. It was impossible to harm him with flames. A ball of emerald flame flowed out of his body and bathed his entire body in flames. Extending his fist, he welcomed Agliro's attack. Boom, boom, boom. Frightening force surged out. 8th-level Devil Scripture. If you have problems with this website, please continue reading your novel on our new website myboxnovel.com. Thanks. Lataying Physique. Wang Ting activated these two scriptures simultaneously. Pitch-black patterns covered his entire body while flashes of lightning sparked on his skin. However, all these changes were hidden behind the flames, so no one noticed them. He used his self-created 5-element fist and threw out all 5 fist consciousness one after the other. It was a dazzling sight. What fist skill is this? Agliro was flabbergasted. The incoming punch was extremely difficult to deal with as it kept changing and was hard to predict. Also, he noticed that when Wang Ting first executed this fist skill, he wasn't proficient. But as the battle continued, he got more and more experienced in his execution. His fist skill became smoother, and there was no pausing in between. Wang Ting was using him to practice his fist skill. Realizing his intentions, Agliro's expression turned ugly. Even with his many years of discipline, he couldn't help but be angry. This fellow was atrocious. Wang Ting saw his expression and knew that he had seen through his plans. This was a little awkward. It was like a person getting caught by the husband when he was dating his wife. At a moment like this, the man would look straight at the husband. Normally, the husband would want to kill this person. Agliro's actions proved his point. His attacks became more ferocious as he hammered Wang Ting furiously. He was yearning to beat him to death. He turned extremely fierce. Wow, don't get so excited. Let's talk properly. This is all a misunderstanding. Zhu Yushao looked at them in disdain. At the very least, Wang Ting was much more frank, but these young men were criticizing him while staring at the scene with wide eyes. Where was their integrity? Chimph, men, Tongji, how does he know your spiritual illusion? Shan Ben Quan exclaimed in astonishment. Shanai Tongji looked at the illusion below, which covered the entire arena. In the end, a bitter smile appeared on her face. She lost for a reason. Wang Ting was much stronger than her. How strong must his spiritual power be to create this illusion that spanned the entire arena? She didn't dare to think further. Only bewilderment was left in her eyes. He was so young. How was this possible? In the arena, Agliro was surrounded by numerous beauties. He discovered that he was standing on a platform in the middle of the bathing pool. The beauties crawled out from the water and tangled around him like water snakes. Venerable, come and play. Agliro glanced around him in surprise. Right away, he knew that this was an illusion. He wanted to search for a loophole, so he stepped on the surface of the water and dashed around the place. However, soon, he realized that no matter how hard he struggled, he was moving in circles. The beauties continued to gather around him. They hugged his legs and moaned, "Venerable, come and play together." Demons, stop this impudence. Agliro shouted, glaring at them furiously. Chapter 616, Life's Disaster. The solemn and empty Colosseum suddenly transformed into a grove filled with alcohol and meat. The scenery changed so quickly that people were caught off guard. Everyone couldn't get that illusion out of their heads, while Agliro was deeply immersed in it. Despite knowing that this was a spiritual illusion, dispelling it was a challenging task. Furthermore, spiritual power acted on one's mind. Even if they knew, it would affect them subconsciously, making them fall for it. Besides, compared to Shanai Tongji, Wang Ting's level was much higher, and his spiritual illusion was naturally much more powerful. At this moment, Agliro was surrounded by the beauties, and his heart was wavering and was on the verge of collapse. His calm face finally revealed traces of lust. Suddenly, there was a flash of clarity in his eyes, and he hurriedly sat down on the stone platform, closing his eyes without saying a thing. He ensured that he wouldn't be affected and disgrace himself. However, it didn't work very well. The power of the beauty's temptation was too great. The strength of this illusion depended on the caster's imagination. With Wang Teng's wealth of experience in watching films, his imagination had no limits. The martial warriors around them were blushing red and cursing. The female warriors turned their heads, feeling embarrassed. I didn't expect Wang Ting to be someone like this. The high priest had a strange expression. The corner of his mouth kept twitching as he lost his cool. He felt extremely uncomfortable, as though he was facing a harsh test. He even cursed Wang Ting and his ancestors in his heart. He questioned himself countless times. Why did he come to host this exchange event? This was simply torture. Priests like him served the gods and had to keep their minds and bodies pure, which was why they couldn't get close to women. Now that Wang Ting had created such a scene, it would take at least half a month for him to calm down his agitated heart. Damn it. What grudges did they have? Why did Wang Ting have to do this to him? Although the high priest knew that Wang Ting wasn't targeting him, he still couldn't suppress the resentment in his heart. He was a little shocked as well, since Wang Ting's spiritual illusion had affected even him. This showed how powerful Wang Ting's spiritual power was. At this moment, Agliro suddenly stood up in the Colosseum, and his force erupted, blasting the surrounding water away. Go away. Go away. Go away. If you have problems with this website, please continue reading your novel on our new website myboxnovel.com. Thanks. A roar came out of his mouth. Agliro had a hideous expression. His eyes were red, and the terror within him was surfacing. Wang Ting stood not far in front of Agliro, but Agliro could see or hear him. His 5 senses were blinded, the result of the spiritual illusion. Of course, the stronger the spiritual power, the stronger the spiritual illusion. The reason why Agliro was deeply entrapped in the spiritual illusion was that Wang Ting's spiritual power was exceptional. Wang Ting had a weird expression and muttered in his heart. Seems like this monk couldn't cultivate his heart well. It's only been a while, and has already in this state. He can't be done just like that, right? However, he was happy to see this scene. The more enraged Agliro was, the more attribute bubbles he would drop, which was a good thing for Wang Ting. Seeing Agliro's outrage, the martial warriors had sympathy for him. He was a monk, but Wang Ting just had to make him lose his cool. There was no humanity in that. The White Eagle Nation's fortes saw what was happening and suddenly thought of Kuhn's tragic situation. It was the same. Fortunately, Agliro wasn't a gene martial warrior, or he wouldn't know how he would end up. Kuhn was a fine example. Go away, stay away from me. Agliro roared with his face full of fear. Master was right. Women were all dangerous beasts that should be avoided. He remembered what his master had said before he went down the mountains. If he could, he would rather have a battle of life and death than face the beauties. Come out, I know you're nearby. Agliro shouted as he looked around for Wang Ting. Almost there. Wang Ting muttered to himself as he picked up the attribute bubbles. Constellation Force, Fire, *35 Constellation Force, Fire, *20 Fire Force *125 Fire Force *102. In the next moment, his mouth curved, and he vanished from his spot. Quietly appearing behind Agliro, the golden slab of brick drew a graceful arc. The brick slammed down. Let's go. Bang. Agliro was caught off guard, and the brick struck the back of his head. He immediately felt a sharp pain on the back of his head. His eyes went dark, and his body shook involuntarily. Despicable. Shameless. Agliro was infuriated. He knew that he was ambushed by Wang Ting. He turned suddenly, looking for his opponent's traces. Thanks for the compliments. Wang Ting appeared behind him once again and swung his brick. Bang. 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 3 times in a row, Agliro was unable to react and defend himself. A few bumps appeared on the back of his head. They were extremely eye-catching. Ah! Agliro went berserk and roared wildly, forcing himself to remain standing. His mind defense was shattered. Oh my, is your head that hard? Wang Ting was surprised and muttered in his heart, did he practice Iron Head Kung Fu? Country Inca has such martial arts. Come on, again. Wang Ting's brick had set Agliro off, and he patted his bald head while yelling. However, he was trying to get Wang Ting to stick his neck out. This request is too much. I can't refuse a request like this. Wang Teng snickered. His body flashed, and he kept changing positions around Agliro, all while smacking the brick on his head. Agliro's face turned dark. Why couldn't he catch Wang Teng at all? He was always one step behind. Wang Teng was as cunning as a fox. He didn't remain in his spot and would disappear after every hit, leaving the other party helpless. And Wang Teng's speed was also frightening. In his perception, Wang Teng's movement was like the wind and lightning, it was extremely fast. The eyelids of the surrounding martial warriors kept jumping. From their expressions, it seemed like they could feel the pain just by listening to the dull sound. Boom. Strength of Ultima. Wang Teng used his strongest means of power for his last brick hit of the match. That horrifying strength struck Agliro's head directly. Let's see how hard your head is. Agliro was terrified. His head was in pain, and you could only see the whites of his eyes. It was too painful. He couldn't take it anymore. That damned bastard. Agliro collapsed with endless resentment in his heart. Silence. The surroundings fell into complete silence. The top-tier talent of Country Inca was knocked unconscious, and his head was covered with bruises. What a miserable state. He shouldn't have suffered like this. However, he faced someone he shouldn't have. This was his fate. He was destined to suffer such a disaster. No, it wasn't just his life's disaster, it was a disaster for all the martial warriors here. Among all the top-tier talents here, who had yet to face Wang Teng? Chapter 617, Fire Essence Scripture *1. When Agliro collapsed, the illusion in the arena disappeared without a trace. Wang Teng also gradually appeared. He stood beside Agliro and looked down at him with sympathy in his eyes. What a poor and sad handsome young man, a person with no face value was invincible. To others, Wang Teng was such a guy. Fortes suddenly felt fortunate. He had also lost to Wang Teng. He felt that Agliro was worse off than him. Could it be that Wang Teng was more violent towards martial warriors with higher talent? He didn't get beaten up so badly because he wasn't talented enough. Fortes was enlightened. He suddenly felt that he understood the crux of the problem. So, should he be happy or sad? Beside him, Xuan, who had woken up, touched his head uncontrollably. Good, there weren't any bumps on his head. He didn't receive the special attention of the brick. Yoke's face turned black when he saw his team's expressions. He felt exasperated. Marsha noticed their expressions too. She glanced at Wang Teng. Suddenly, she felt an attractive aura around this young man from Country Shia. He had used his brick to make these talented martial warriors fearful of him. Wang Teng was honestly quite interesting. Although he was a little evil, it was nothing in front of his overpowering abilities. Everyone would only see how powerful he was. Shunai Tongji was staring at him with wide eyes. I didn't know you could use spiritual illusion like this. Wang Teng had opened a new path for her to explore. Whether this path led to heaven or hell depended on the person. A strange glint appeared in Shunai Tongji's eyes. Shan Ben Quan, who was sitting beside her, felt a chill down his spine. He glanced at her and felt that something about her had changed. In the large Eagle Nation's direction, Gerald's eyelids were jumping uncontrollably. What on earth was Wang Teng? How could he be so ruthless? At first, he wanted to have a duel with this talent from Country Shia, but now, that thought had vanished from his mind. He didn't even want to think about it. Arnold looked at Gerald's expression in satisfaction. Important things must be emphasized thrice. The high priest saw that Agliro couldn't get up, so he announced the results. Wang Teng from Country Shia has won. After he finished speaking, he looked at Wang Teng. Wang Teng remained indifferent. No emotions could be seen on his face. It was as if defeating Agliro was an insignificant matter. He was putting on an act. The high priest felt his teeth hurting and turned his head away. What he didn't see wouldn't hurt him. Wang Teng picked up the attribute bubbles on the ground. Constellation Force, Fire, *52 Emperor Realm Enlightenment *40 Emperor Realm Enlightenment *36 Ultimate Stage Fire Talent *50 Wang Teng gasped softly as the attribute bubbles merged into his body. He was surprised. Agliro's spirit and enlightenment were in the Emperor realm. What Wang Ting didn't know was, his unexpected actions had ignited the devil inside Agliro's heart. His mentality exploded, and his spirit suffered an impact. That was why he dropped some Emperor realm spirit and enlightenment attributes. If not, based on his spirit and enlightenment realm, he would never drop Emperor realm attributes. Wang Ting counted his gains. He had received 125 points of Emperor realm spirit and 106 points of Emperor realm enlightenment. Enlightenment, 212 3000, Imperial realm, spirit, 243 3000, Imperial realm. His spirit and enlightenment rose a little again. Next, he looked at his surprise gain ultimate stage fire talent. Wang Ting had 5 ultimate stage talents now: wood, water, wind, lightning, ice. Adding this new one in, he had 6 in total. Oh my, he was getting more and more outstanding. Wang Ting felt that his talents were going to break out of his body at any moment. He couldn't hide them anymore. This was so troublesome. Visit Ria.me for extra chapters. Honestly, he just wanted to get some constellation force so that he could study the constellation conversion scripture. He didn't think there would be so many attribute bubbles. Wang Ting counted his spoils again. In this match, he had gained more than 200 points of constellation force. Constellation force, Fire 353. Wang Ting glanced at the number on his attributes panel. He sensed the fire energy in his body once again and felt that his efforts were worth it. This was how you got more attributes. If not, how could he raise his realm quickly? The path to becoming stronger was filled with blood and tears. Wang Ting understood this deeply, and he was slowly starting to accept this cruel reality. Agliro was brought down by his companions. Those martial warriors stared at Wang Ting with a complicated expression. They seemed afraid yet furious at the same time. However, they didn't dare to display it directly. The hatred of weaklings. Wang Ting didn't take it to heart. He was wearing a strange look on his face. When Agliro was carried away, an attribute bubble appeared below his body. Was he lying on that bubble just now? Attribute bubbles can be laid on. Wang Ting complained in his heart, but this was the truth. One attribute bubble floated above the ground, looking lonely and sad. Wang Ting took pity on it and picked it up reluctantly. Wang Ting was dumbstruck. And it was an ancient scripture from country Inca. As the attribute bubble merged into his body, an outline of a person appeared in Wang Ting's mind. The person sat cross-legged on the ground, with bright lines and shining dots appearing on his body. Force flowed along these lines as a flame appeared above this person. The constellation force conversion method. Wang Ting regained his composure quickly. His gaze turned sharp and bright. He saw a hint of how he could convert his force into constellation force on this ancient scripture from country Inca. Many thoughts went through his mind. Ideas fired out and merged with one another. Finally, they unified into one thought. Wang Ting grabbed this thought, and a smile appeared at the corner of his lips. The constellation scripture could be expected soon. Excited, he wanted to create this scripture immediately. However, he knew that this wasn't the right time. He could only suppress his restlessness. Wang Ting, the match has ended. You can leave now. The high priest opened his mouth and said to Wang Ting. No hurry. I want to continue challenging others. Wang Ting smiled and replied. Are you sure? The high priest frowned. This exchange is a fair event. We will provide martial warriors with resting time after each match. However, if you volunteer to continue, no one will stop you. Since I came down, I don't plan to go back up until I've challenged all the top talents from the various nations. Wang Ting scanned the arena and smiled. So, everyone, do you plan to come one by one or attack together? If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 618, Gang Fight. Mobbed. A commotion erupted after Wang Ting finished speaking. He was challenging all the top talents from various countries. Was he looking down on them or was he thinking too highly of himself? Everyone was exceptionally angry. A talent would have arrogance. It was all right if Wang Ting wanted to defeat them one by one, but he wanted to fight them together and humiliate them. This young man was way in over his head. The talents from the other nations were indignant. They stared at Wang Ting and started discussing in low voices. On Country Boar's side, Valeria was laughing as her eyes sparkled with excitement. Yes, that's the way to go. Beat them up. Darwin was speechless. My young lady, aren't you afraid of creating more trouble? Shunai Tongji, Shuan, and the martial warriors who fought with Wang Teng before remained indifferent. This had nothing to do with them. They didn't need to act. They weren't included in Wang Teng's challenge. Zhu Yushao, Mu Jigua, and the other martial warriors from Country Xia exchanged glances with one another. They thought that Wang Ting was going to challenge the martial warriors one by one. How did this become a gang fight? This fellow never played by the book. Wasn't he afraid of getting mobbed? There were so many talented martial warriors here. Just the thought of them ganging up on one guy was frightening enough. How did he have the courage to say that? Even Ji Xiuming and Luo Cheng were astounded. Their gazes flickered. They had full respect for Wang Teng. He did something they didn't dare to do. Challenging all top martial warriors from various countries sounded crazy but exciting. On the other hand, Dan Taixian was stunned. This wasn't her intention. This fellow is creating trouble again. If you want to die, you don't have to go this way. Damn it, they were supposed to have a spectacular ending, but if Wang Ting got mobbed by the other martial warriors, they would have to leave this place dejectedly, just like the White Eagle Nation. Dan Taixuan's expression turned ugly. She couldn't curse him out loud, so she did it in her heart repeatedly. She hoped that the other countries had some ego and would disagree with his outrageous request. Unfortunately, things didn't go as she hoped. The martial warriors from the various countries stood up one after another and said, "We need to discuss." The high priest looked at Wang Ting and reminded him, "It's not too late to take back your words." "It's all right. I never eat my words." Wang Ting shook his head, saying nonchalantly, "But you should hurry. Don't waste my time." The high priest stopped persuading him. Reminding him was his last ounce of kindness. He looked at the other martial warriors and said, "You have 5 minutes." The martial warriors were elated. The martial warriors from the nations that Wang Ting hadn't challenged gathered together and discussed in hushed voices. They even glanced at Wang Teng occasionally. Their gazes were anything but friendly. Wang Teng remained calm. If a gaze could kill people, he would have died many times over. He was used to these situations. An outstanding person would always get targeted. If the martial warriors knew what he was thinking, they might just drown him with their spits. To hell with being targeted. He was the one targeting them. Dan Taixian seemed worried. It looked like the martial warriors wanted to attack Wang Teng together. This was normal, though. Wang Teng was in the limelight. They couldn't beat him alone, so they could only attack together. Besides, Wang Teng had suggested this personally. If they didn't accept it, it would be a waste of his effort. 5 minutes passed quickly. The martial warriors arrived at their decision. Wang Teng is extremely strong. We aren't his match if we fight him one by one. However, we still want to experience the power of Country Xia's top talent, so we choose to attack together. A martial warrior from Country Spade stepped out and said. Shameless. Shuan and Gerald looked at them in contempt, scoffing at their actions. Why look for excuses when they wanted to mob him? Everyone knew what they were doing, seeking excuses for their despicable act. The high priest looked at Wang Teng. He didn't comment. He understood that Wang Teng was firm in his decision to challenge all the martial warriors, so he said, "All right. But, one country can only send one martial warrior." "Of course." The martial warrior from Country Spade nodded instantly. Sending one martial warrior for each country was the limit. If a country sent 2 or more, they would be throwing their reputation away. Visit Riadel. Me for extra chapters. After receiving the acknowledgement, many martial warriors stepped into the arena. There were quite a number of them. The high priest felt his head spinning at this sight. For so many years, this was the first time such a scene had appeared during the exchange. Wang Teng had broken the norms of this exchange event with his first appearance. More than 20 martial warriors surrounded Wang Ting. These martial warriors came from Country Bat, some Country Spade, Country RAF. But some countries didn't participate. There was nothing glamorous about winning this match. However, if you got defeated, it would be highly embarrassing. Some countries still remained logical. Wang Ting glanced at the wolves around him indifferently while snickering in his heart. His scheme had worked. The competition was coming to an end. If he didn't grab this chance to collect more attributes, it would be a waste of this exchange event. Start, the high priest said. Boom. Immediately, all the martial warriors released their force and closed in on Wang Ting. They were holding all kinds of weapons. Battle blades, swords, battle axes. There were too many of them. Their forces were different too. Many different colors exploded in the arena, and these force glows engulfed Wang Ting. The martial warriors from Country Xia felt anxious for Wang Ting. They stared intently at the arena. Suddenly, amidst the dazzling lights, a figure soared into the sky and turned into a rainbow. Multiple people were chasing after him. Some slashed their blades and swords, releasing sword and blade glows towards this figure. At the same time, more people appeared in front of him and blocked his path. Wang Ting's expression didn't change. He moved his body and turned into rays of lingering shadows. Wind soul conscious. He had turned into a gust of wind. No one could predict his movements, and all the attacks behind him landed in the air. Among the martial warriors in front, a martial warrior from Country RAF clenched his battle axes and chopped them down. Two thick and heavy yellow glows shot towards Wang Ting. A golden object appeared in Wang Ting's hand. He lifted his brick and hit the yellow glows. Boom. To his astonishment, the martial warrior from Country RAF realized that Wang Ting had shattered his attack. His face was filled with disbelief, and his eyes were wide open. At this moment, Wang Ting disappeared and rushed in between a few martial warriors. He took care of the martial warrior who threw his axes at him first. He swung his brick out and smacked the guy right in the face. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Chapter 619. No matter how many attacks you have, I will destroy them with my brick. This martial warrior from Country RAF was a muscular hunk. When his cheek was smacked with the brick, his meat started rippling. His mouth and nose went askew from the hit. Immediately, he let out an agonizing scream. The martial warriors around him shivered when they heard his shrill scream. Wang Ting ignored the other people and only focused on this one martial warrior for the time being. Taking care of one person meant one less opponent to deal with. He smashed his brick down continuously. Just listening to the sound alone was enough to make one's head hurt. The muscular hunk had an iron head, though. He didn't faint immediately, but he couldn't bear with the pain either. He wielded his battle axes and blocked Wang Ting's attacks. At the same time, he shouted, "Why are you all standing there? Are you waiting for him to tackle us one by one?" The other martial warriors regained their senses and charged towards Wang Ting once again. A martial warrior attacked him with his claw. He slashed a few sharp golden claw glows in the air, all aimed at Wang Ting's head. Some martial warriors swung their blades while others held their short swords and targeted his legs. Wang Ting snorted. He reacted at the speed of lightning and blocked the attacks with his brick. His other hand remained busy too. He punched his fists out and shattered the blade glow. The residual force threw the martial warrior back more than 10 meters. At the same time, a sharp glint appeared on his body. The sharp glint of light split into multiple rays and shot towards the martial warriors around him. The weapons separated from the shooting star spiral collided with the weapons of the martial warriors around him, giving rise to metallic clangs all around. Sparks flew everywhere. This still wasn't enough. Wang Ting activated his spiritual power again, and the flying daggers hidden in his boots sprung out. They turned into lingering shadows in the air and started attacking the martial warriors behind him. Everyone was flabbergasted. Was this the real skill of a divine spirit master? He could fight more than 20 people at once without being at a disadvantage. He was like a bug. Shunai Tongji's expression changed slightly. When she saw Wang Ting executing his flying daggers, she knew that he was holding back when he fought with her. Had he used the flying daggers on her, she wouldn't be able to block them. At this moment, only the martial warrior from country RAF was facing Wang Ting. Cold sweat dripped down his forehead. He took a step back in the air. Wang Ting smiled, revealing his eerily white teeth. Then, he disappeared. The martial warrior from country RAF squinted and decided to retreat. Suddenly, he felt a pain at the back of his head. His thoughts slowed down. A few more violent smashes on his head and the martial warrior from country RAF finally couldn't take it. His eyes rolled back, and he fainted. Bang! He fell straight to the ground. After twitching a few times, his body stopped moving. Wang Ting was too lazy to notice him again, but the high priest couldn't help but glance at this martial warrior. There were many large bumps on his head. They were extremely eye-catching and unsightly. The high priest shook his head. He looked up at the sky and raised his eyebrows. He saw another figure falling down. Boom! This person's head was also covered with bumps, and he was unconscious. The second one, the high priest muttered softly. It looked like losing in numbers wasn't a problem for Wang Ting. Suddenly, he wanted to know how long Wang Ting would take to take care of all these martial warriors. In the sky, Wang Ting shuttled back and forth between his opponents, throwing his brick out occasionally. He never missed. Every attack landed on an opponent. Wang Ting's main aim was to get more attributes. Hence, he kept a good gauge of his strength and didn't knock his opponents unconscious with the first attack. How did he know how hard to hit? Well, practice. There was no technique here. The more he hit, the more skilled he got. Third one. The high priest counted. As time passed, more and more figures started falling from the sky. The martial warriors in the spectators' stand were stunned. Was this a match or a game of whack-a-mole? Were these martial warriors fooling around? Some people were gloating in their misfortune. These martial warriors had wanted to trample on country Xia. They thought that they could win by numbers, but instead, Wang Ting was the one walking over them. Visit Ria Del. Me for extra chapters. In the sky, there were still around 9 martial warriors resisting stubbornly. They knew that if they didn't give it their all, they would lose. Hence, they released their ultimate moves at Wang Ting. A blade glow more than 10 meters long chopped through the sky and slashed towards Wang Ting. The sword glows intertwined in the air and shot towards Wang Ting. Multiple spear glows blocked his paths of retreat. Violent explosions occurred all over the sky. Wang Ting remained calm. He exerted force into the brick and smashed it out. This brick was forged using a rare material. Hence, it was able to withstand any element of force. Moreover, the more force he instilled in it, the heavier it would get. Wang Ting infused considerable force into it, and it reached an unbelievable weight. Fortunately, his strength was amazing too. Normal martial warriors wouldn't be able to release the full potential of the brick. The instant the brick collided with the forces around it, force waves spread out. Blade glow, sword glow, all the attacks were destroyed. Destroyed with a single strike. No matter how many attacks you have, I will destroy them with my brick. The martial warriors flew backward from the impact of the force waves. They were thunderstruck and filled with disbelief. Wang Ting followed up his success and flew closer toward them. All the martial warriors started plummeting to the ground. The high priest's expression was weird. He paid a silent tribute to these martial warriors. Wang Ting left the martial warrior from country Spade for the last. He stared at his opponent and walked forward, step by step. The martial warrior from country Spade swallowed his saliva. He glanced at the brick in Wang Ting's hand and felt his head turning numb. His leg went weak too. He wanted to admit defeat but started stuttering uncontrollably. Wang Ting stopped in front of him and slammed the brick on his face. The martial warrior turned pale. Then, his vision went black, and he felt excruciating pain on his face. Only someone who got hit in the face would understand this pain. The martial warrior teared up, and mucus flowed down his nose. There was blood mixed with it. Wang Teng didn't show any mercy. He hammered his brick a few more times until the martial warrior's face was bruised and swollen. He had fainted. The high priest remained silent. When the last martial warrior fell down, he let out a huge sigh. There were no fancy techniques used in this match. Brute force was the way to go from the start to the end. These martial warriors could only get tortured by Wang Teng. Their plight was tragic. The audience around him was amazed and lost their words for some time. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 620. Success and ending. 25 martial warriors were lying neatly on the ground, with swollen and bruised faces. The leaders of the 25 countries all had grave expressions. They wanted to bring down country Shia, but they shot themselves in the foot instead. Even after joining forces, the 25 martial warriors were not a match for Wang Teng. They lost terribly. They truly realized what it meant by having a taste of their own medicine. There was never an instance where a person had fought 25 people at once. A match like this was bound to be remembered, and those countries would be setting a negative example. The countries that didn't participate in the match were gloating. At the same time, they were astounded by Wang Teng's strength. He defeated 25 talented martial warriors alone. Although those were not big countries, an ordinary martial warrior couldn't have accomplished that. When outnumbered, one must not only be strong, but the skills must be powerful as well. Otherwise, it would be in vain. Xuan, Gerald, and the others examined themselves and knew they couldn't achieve the same feat. They looked at Wang Teng as if they were looking at a monster. This guy was not a human. Maybe this was what a top-tier talent truly was, and they might be the fake ones. The talents from the other countries could not help but doubt themselves. At Country Shia's spectators' stand, Zhu Yushao and the others were stunned as well. They already knew that Wang Teng was powerful, but he had once again exceeded their expectations. No one could tell how strong he truly was. It was like he was shrouded by a thick layer of fog. Ji Xiaoming, Luo Cheng, and the rest couldn't help but feel a little envious. This was a global platform, not the first martial arts competition in Country Shia. After this match, Wang Teng's name would be known throughout the world. They were all young, and in front of such a huge honor, no one could say that they didn't care about it. Ren Qingtsang clenched his fists tightly. A trace of jealousy flashed in his eyes. There was no way he could calm down when Wang Teng was about to become his nightmare. Dan Taixian glanced at him and frowned slightly. That look made her very uncomfortable. This Ren Qingtsang, she decided that when she returned, she would go to the Leitang martial house and speak to Lei Zhunting. There was something wrong with his disciple. If he decided to stir trouble, she wouldn't be kind to him. The military wouldn't treat him politely either. Wang Teng was someone who had made a name for himself in front of the three great commanders. Even if Ren Qingtsang was a genius or even a general stage martial warrior, he wouldn't have an easy time. Wang Teng was not someone that an ordinary general stage martial warrior could compare to. Wang Teng from Country Shia has won this match. The high priest finally announced the result. He paused for a while, looked around, and said, "Are there any other talents who wish to challenge Wang Teng?" The Colosseum fell into a deep silence. What was the point when those who could fight were defeated? Everyone looked at the high priest with resentment. They always felt that this old guy had ulterior motives. The high priest seemed a little regretful. He stood up, looked at the setting sun, and said with emotion, "Thank you, everyone, for letting me witness such a wonderful exchange event. The martial warriors of all countries are excellent. The large eagle nations Gerald, the white eagle nations Xuan, country Incas Agliro, country Boars Valeria, country Neons Shanai Tongji. Of course, this time, Country Shia's martial warriors had a phenomenal and amazing display. Especially you, Mr. Wang Teng." Having said that, the high priest placed his hand on his chest and gave Wang Teng a martial warrior's salute, showing him his respect. The martial warriors were flustered. The high priest wasn't someone of ordinary status, and he was a 12-star general stage warrior. Why was he doing this? Only the high priest knew that Wang Ting's strength had already reached the 12-star general stage. This young man was so mysterious that he could not see through him. Showing respect to the strong was the right thing to do. Furthermore, Wang Ting was so young, and youth meant limitless potential. He had a hunch that it would not take long for Wang Ting to surpass him. Hence, it wasn't surprising for him to show respect to a talent with such bright prospects. If he could get his favor, it would be even better. Mount Saint was a neutral organization, and naturally, it wouldn't participate in any conflicts between powerful nations. However, they weren't against forming connections with talents. They would even recruit talents from some countries. Otherwise, there wouldn't be so many strong people in Mount Saint. Wang Ting heard the praises from the high priest. However, all he did was smile indifferently. He didn't really take it seriously. Visit Riadel. Me for extra chapters. To him, the people of Mount Saint were opportunists. He didn't hold anything against them, but he didn't have any good feelings for them either. The high priest stopped. Without saying anything else, he faced the crowd and continued, "This exchange event is over, and my duties have ended. Everyone, we'll meet again if we are fated." After he finished speaking, he didn't waste any time and set off on a journey to the top of Mount Saint, gradually disappearing into the ancient buildings that were shrouded in mist. Everyone came back to their senses, and their expressions were complex. They felt lost. The exchange event ended just like that. Many top-tier talents had appeared on the exchange event and stole all the limelight from the martial warriors of smaller countries. Some of the smaller countries looked at the martial warriors from larger countries like Country Shia and the White Eagle Nation with envy and helplessness. Compared to the larger countries, they didn't have top-tier talents. In front of them, they could only watch and do nothing. It was really frustrating. However, now that the exchange event had ended, they didn't stay any longer and were prepared to go down the mountain. The 25 martial warriors who were lying in the Colosseum were carried away by their countrymen. The only things were left were the floating attribute bubbles. Wang Ting used his spiritual power and collected the surrounding attribute bubbles. Metal Blade Conscious * 340 Spiritual Realm Spirit * 110 Spiritual Realm Spirit * 135 Spiritual Realm Enlightenment * 102 Spiritual Realm Enlightenment * 95 Wang Teng's eyes flashed. His gains from the recent match were substantial, and it didn't waste his hard work and efforts. Defeating 25 talented martial warriors was a very tiring feat. Farming attribute bubbles was physically taxing. Only farmers would know. Although the harvest was gratifying, Wang Teng wasn't in a hurry to check his inventory. He walked over to join Dan Taixian and the others. He was greeted by weird gazes from Zhu Yushao and the others. It felt as though they wanted to take him apart to see what he was made of. "Why are you looking at me like that? It's so frightening." Wang Teng's scalp was tingling, and he quickly took a step back. These people were so evil. Wang Teng's words evoked a sense of familiarity in them. It was still fine. It felt familiar. Looked like the person in front of them wasn't a monster after all. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 621. Damn it, she's seducing me. Everyone went down the mountain, but they didn't leave the small town. The sky was getting dark, so no one was in a hurry to leave. They decided to stay one more night in this small town. The host also prepared a sumptuous dinner banquet for them to allow them to interact with one another. After the competition, everyone should sit down and have a nice chat. This was Mount Saint's idea too. Interest was the most important thing for every country. Smaller countries were willing to stick to larger ones for protection. This was diplomacy for larger nations too. The banquet started. Lights lit up the hall brightly. The decorations were extravagant, and countless delicious food and drinks were placed on the table. Attendants dressed neatly in black coats and white shirts shuttled back and forth in the hall. When Wang Teng and his team arrived, the hall was already lively. Conversations and waves of laughter were heard continuously. The arrival of Country Shia caused a short moment of silence. The biggest winner of this event. Everyone felt complicated, especially when they saw the young man's indifferent face. Many people's emotions were ignited. Mr. Wang Ting, Darwin from Country Boar came over to welcome them. Eat and drink however you want and get a good sleep. We will return to the country tomorrow. Dan Taixian led everyone forward as she spoke to them. Darwin and the people from Country Boar were exceptionally enthusiastic. Valeria kept pestering Wang Ting with a naive and pure smile on her face. Wang Ting felt frustrated. He didn't understand why Valeria didn't want to let him go. Was it a mistake to be too outstanding? He didn't intend to flirt. Besides, this butterfly was a little too muscular. He couldn't handle it. Wang Ting gave an awkward but polite smile. Zhu Yushao and Ji Xiuming, who were standing beside him, were suppressing their laughter and shooting him looks of sympathy. Why don't you just agree to her? Zhu Yushao spoke to him using voice transmission. Go away. Wang Teng was exasperated. He turned and glared at those gloating fellows. Fortunately, people from other countries came over and saved him. Wang Teng had beaten almost every country during this exchange. He overpowered all the other top talents. No one could steal his limelight. The countries on good terms with country Shia came over for a chat. Even those who didn't have much interaction with their country came to show their faces. The best regulator of a conversation was wine. Everyone exchanged glasses and drank to their heart's content. Wang Teng wasn't worried. With his physique, having some wine wouldn't affect him. These people came and left quickly, not staying for long. They knew themselves well. Based on their ability, they didn't have the right to take up too much of Wang Teng and country Shia's time. How does it feel to be famous? Zhu Yushao nudged Wang Teng and teased. Wang Teng glanced at her and smiled. Amazing. You will never get to experience it. Zhu Yushao felt someone punching her heart. She forgot that this fellow was a shameless and despicable person. What was she thinking when she decided to tease him? There must be something wrong with her just now. At this moment, another person walked over. This time, there was only one person. Zhu Yushao noticed her and was puzzled. Why is she here? This lady was Marsha from the White Eagle Nation. The relationship between country Shia and the White Eagle Nation was a little ambiguous, so why was she here? Wang Teng didn't understand either. He touched his chin in deep thought. Did she get fooled by his handsome appearance and wanted to experience a spectacular long-distance relationship? Wang Teng glanced at her voluptuous figure and long legs. Suddenly, he felt that he could consider this option, even though he was a little reluctant. After all, it wasn't good to reject others. Hey, she's here. Hurry up and wipe your saliva. Zhu Yushao elbowed his thigh and whispered. Wang Ting stretched his hand out unconsciously and wiped his mouth. He reacted instantly and glared at Zhu Yushao. In the end, he had fallen for her trick. However, there was some truth in her words. Marsha was already in front of him. She seemed to know what he was thinking. There was an ambiguous smile on her face as she looked at him. Cough, what's the matter? Wang Ting coughed awkwardly. He kept a stern face as he asked in a seemingly serious tone. Visit Ria Del. Me for extra chapters. Are you going to let a lady stand and talk? Marsha asked. There are many seats here. You can choose one. Wang Ting felt that this lady was picking a quarrel, so he rolled his eyes secretly. Insensitive man. Marsha's face turned black. She glared at him and sat down, crossing her legs elegantly. She didn't wear her battle uniform tonight. Instead, she was dressed in a beautiful black gown that showed off her curvy body. Her lipstick was bright red, and a faint smell of perfume lingered in the air. She looked amazing. Wang Ting had to admit that this lady was extremely attractive. When she crossed her legs, she revealed a section of her fair skin. Chu Fei, Yang Bo, and Zhao Yuanwu immediately got attracted by the sight. They swallowed their saliva involuntarily. Even Mu Zhiguo and Ji Xiuming, who acted maturely most of the time, glanced at her secretly. Their hearts were melting. HMPH, men. Zhu Yushao looked at them in disdain. Marsha lifted the glass of wine on the table beside her and said, Congratulations on being the spotlight of this year's exchange. Wang Ting's expression was weird. Are you sure you're here to congratulate me? Is there a problem with that? Marcia pretended that she didn't know what he was saying. No, of course not. As long as you're happy. Wang Ting squinted and smiled. No matter what she was planning, he believed that with his vigilance, he wouldn't fall into her traps. Wang Ting raised his glass and touched hers. He took a sip of wine and said, "Thank you. All right, have a fun time. I won't interrupt you anymore." Marcia didn't stay. After drinking her wine, she got up to leave. "You're leaving already?" Chu Fei and the others asked in surprise. Wang Ting was stunned too. Was this lady really just here to congratulate him? Did he misunderstand something? She left without any hesitation. Did this mean that she didn't have any thoughts towards him? Or was she playing cat and mouse? There was no chance for Wang Ting to put his flirting skills to use. This lady wasn't acting according to the script. How should he get her? He squinted and snorted in his heart. He decided to use the ultimate move, do nothing. At this moment, the pretty back suddenly stopped. Marcia turned around and winked at Wang Ting, her tongue sliding through her lips. "We will meet again. Damn it, she's seducing me. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible." Chapter 622. An all-round harvest. Wang Ting looked at Marcia as she swayed away. A sentence popped up in his mind: never underestimate the skills of a woman. This demon. He mustn't offend her. He couldn't afford to offend her. "Come back, she's gone." Dan Taixian glanced at him and said coldly. "Cough, I'm just thinking what tricks she had up her sleeve." "Please don't misunderstand me," Wang Ting said. "Do you think I'll believe you?" Dan Taixian said furiously. "Is that lady prettier than me?" Valeria stared at Wang Ting unhappily with a sad face. Gasp. Wang Ting took a sharp breath in fear. Although Chu Fei and the others were a little envious of him at first, when they saw Wang Ting in this desperate situation, they were elated. "You deserve it. This is the consequence of flirting around." Wang Ting sized up Valeria seriously and contemplated for some time. Then, he said, "You look better than her." Everyone, how could there be someone so shameless? Wang Ting spent much effort before he managed to comfort Valeria. However, after she left, the pretty female martial warriors from other nations came over and congratulate him as if they were inspired by Marcia. Within a few minutes, Wang Ting was surrounded by elbow envious. All the men at the scene were green with envy. "He's popular with ladies." Gerald chuckled. "It's normal. Outstanding males have the right to mate first," Arnold said. "Fart." Gerald's expression turned strange. He didn't expect Arnold to say such a line. Wine spurted out of his mouth. "Did I say something wrong?" Arnold asked. "No, it makes sense." Gerald's lips trembled. On the other side, Fortes' face was red with anger. He looked at Marcia and questioned her. "Why did you congratulate him?" Marcia wasn't an easy person to bully. When she heard Fortes' questioning tone, her face turned cold, and she replied, "Take note of your status. You don't have the right to interfere in my business." "You." Fortes couldn't refute. "All right, Fortes, keep it down." Yoke felt helpless. These talents had strong personalities. He couldn't handle them all at the same time. But he still reminded Marcia, "Marcia, our relationship with Country Shia isn't good. You better take care of yourself." "I know." Marcia nodded and kept quiet. Fortes snorted and looked at Wang Ting. Jealousy flashed past his eyes. Shuan watched him silently from the side. Nothing in the world seemed to be able to affect him. Agliro placed his palms together when he saw this scene. A smart glint was shimmering in his eyes as he recalled what had happened during the competition. He was in deep thought. Should he enter the world and cultivate like Wang Ting? Walk through a field of flowers with no leaves on your body. He had read this sentence online after the competition. It made much sense to him. You wouldn't be fooled after many experiences. Wang Ting didn't know that his unintentional act had caused a monk to go astray. Close to 10 p.m., the banquet finally came to an end. The crowd dispersed. Wang Ting let out a sigh of relief. He never knew that ladies could be so scary. When he was surrounded by them, he was happy and in pain. Everyone was speechless when they saw his expression. Why do you look so unwilling when there's something good in front of you? Chu Fei asked enviously. That's right. This is too much. If you're so unwilling, you can give the chance to us, Yang Bo agreed. You don't understand. Ladies are scary creatures, especially when there's a horde of them. They're worse in numbers. Wang Ting shook his head and sighed. F***K, you're acting. Chu Fei and the others wanted to hit him. Right then, the atmosphere died down. Repeat what you've said. A cold voice filled with killing intent echoed in the air. Wang Ting's head turned numb. He turned his neck stiffly and saw Dan Taixian and Zhu Yushao's black faces. He laughed awkwardly. My stomach is hurting. I'll take my leave first. He ran off. At night, Wang Ting stayed in his hotel room. He sat cross-legged on the sofa and counted his gains. He pulled out the attributes panel. The first thing that appeared in his vision was, Origin of Life, 1375. The origin of life had a significant increase. Wang Ting could almost feel his lifespan increasing. No one would say no to a longer life, right? Without a doubt, the origin of life was his greatest gain. Enlightenment, 233,000, Imperial Realm, Spirit, 256,000, Imperial Realm. Wang Ting's spirit and enlightenment were both in the Imperial Realm. Hence, their growth was a little slow. They were still crawling at the 200 range. However, he was already more powerful than the majority of the people on Earth. Even though the increase was slow, he wasn't worried. His spiritual power was still his trump card. Actually, he was progressing very fast. Other people had to spend much more time if they wanted to raise their spiritual power. Next, the forces. Metal Force, 7500 10,000, 10-star, Wood Force, 6780 10,000, 10-star, Water Force, 9230 10,000, 10-star, Fire Force, 6350 10,000, 10-star, Earth Force, 7420 10,000, 10-star. Wang Ting looked at his 5 forces. All of them had a huge leap. He was instantly satisfied. The exchange event was a gathering of talents. Everyone was at the Brigadier General stage and above, so the attribute bubbles everyone dropped were sizable. This was why his forces rose significantly. All these forces were at the later stage of the Brigadier General stage. They were close to achieving a breakthrough. Ice Force, 5329,000, 9-star, Poison Force, 4575,000, 7-star, Wind Force, 657,000, 8-star, Lightning Force, 820 10,000, 10-star, Visit Riadel. Me for extra chapters. His 4 mutated elements grew too, especially his Lightning Force. It shot straight to the 10-star Brigadier General stage. He had to thank Xuan for this. What a good man he was. Then, there was the Constellation Force. Constellation Force, Fire 353. The display of the system was a little strange. It only showed the value and not the realm. The realm might not be available because his Constellation Force was too little or he hadn't converted all his forces into the Constellation Force. But, his Constellation Force did increase after this exchange. The only force that didn't grow was his Dark Force. Thinking about it, it made sense. Why would there be dark apparitions at a place where the top talents of all nations were? In terms of consciouses, Wang Ting's spoils were quite notable. All his conscious attributes saw improvements. Lei Battle Conscious, 285 10,000, first level, Wind Soul Conscious, 312 1000, first level, Snake Coil Conscious, 151,000, first level. These 3 traits were new attributes. Everyone had their pros and were extremely useful conscious attributes. Among them, the Lei Battle Conscious was able to increase his battle ability, the Wind Soul Conscious could increase his speed, and the Snake Coil Conscious was a battle technique. His other consciouses was as follows: Ice Spear Conscious, 365 1000, first level, 5-element Fist Conscious, 68 58,000, 8th level, Metal Blade Conscious, 67 77,000, 7th level, Fire Blade Conscious, 75 28,000, 8th level, Water Blade Conscious, 51 10 7000, 7th level, Wood Blade Conscious, 893,000, 3rd level, Earth Blade Conscious, 3285,000, 5th level, Metal Sword Conscious, 1468,000, 8th level, Water Sword Conscious, 3486,000, 6th level, Fire Sword Conscious, 2889,000, 9th level, Earth Sword Conscious, 3966,000, 6th level, Wood Sword Conscious, 2984,000, 4th level. These were attributes that Wang Ting found useful. He had picked up many conscious attributes for unpopular weapons, but he ignored them. These conscious attributes weren't useful to him even if he picked them up. Fist Conscious, Blade Conscious, and Sword Conscious were the 3 most commonly used conscious attributes. He wouldn't give them up. He had merged his Fist Conscious into his 5-element Fist Conscious. In the future, he would do the same for his Blade and Sword Conscious to create a unique battle skill solely for him. When he fought with Agliro, he had used the 5-element fist and made him suffer. He had just created his 5-element fist, so when he perfected it in the future, it would become stronger. He felt that he could achieve a great feat. This was a path solely for him. Wang Teng decided that once he went back, he would find some time to study this properly. He also received some battle techniques and scriptures, but most of them weren't at the sky rank. Hence, he skipped through all of them. He wasn't getting arrogant, but non-sky rank scriptures weren't useful to him anymore. The greatest gain was undoubtedly the fire essence scripture he received from Agliro. This was an ancient scripture from country Inca, and a rough method to convert ordinary force into the constellation force was written inside. It would be a great help when Wang Ting was creating a force conversion scripture. As for battle techniques, the only one that could make his eyes lit up was the spiritual illusion. While fighting with Agliro, he had tried the power of spiritual illusion and found it quite useful. If he was creative enough, he could use spiritual illusion however he wanted. In terms of talent, his greatest gain was the ultimate stage lightning talent and the ice cocoon physique. These were mutated elements and were extremely rare. Especially the ice cocoon physique. Normal people wouldn't possess it. The birth of a physique talent was rare. Country Snow must have used up their luck for many generations to have one in a small country like theirs. But no matter how rare it was, Wang Ting still got it. As a bug, he could be unreasonable. After counting his gains, he let out a long sigh. When he opened his eyes slowly, 2 sharp glints shot out of them. He stood up and walked to the window. As he stared at the quiet and dark night sky, he gradually calmed down. He was worried that he would commit the same mistake and live an unaccomplished life as he did in his previous one. He was worried that his family would disappear and that his life would end silently. As a result, he had been working hard to raise his ability, all this while without resting. With his continuous progress, he was finally able to stand at the top of the pyramid for martial warriors on Earth. He had some ability to protect himself and his family benefited from it. He was satisfied. Chapter 623, Going up Mount Saint. The next morning, sunlight shone in through the window and landed on the bed. Wang Teng sat cross-legged on his soft mattress. The blanket hadn't been touched. He slowly opened his eyes. A colorful glimmer flashed in his eyes and disappeared in an instant. It looked divine. He got up from bed, leaving only a light dent on the blanket. This was a display of the powerful control of his body strength. Wang Ting cultivated everywhere. He practiced his strength and control every day in his every action, hoping to release the potential of his power to its limit. His enlightenment and physique were at an extremely high level, so he was able to go into more details in his cultivation. He took off his clothes, revealing his well-proportioned and almost perfect body. His muscles were tight and firm. The outlines were defined like a sculpture. He took a few minutes to wash up. Then, he dressed himself and dried his hair. He walked out of his room and went down for breakfast. Zhu Yushao and the others were already here. They were sitting in a corner of the restaurant and having breakfast. They chatted occasionally. They immediately noticed Wang Ting when he entered. "Here." Zhu Yushao waved at him. Wang Ting smiled and nodded at them. He went to get his breakfast first. The breakfast was buffet style. All kinds of cuisines were provided. You could choose whatever dish you fancied. As a Force chef master, he could smell what was delicious and what wasn't. After picking his food, Wang Ting carried his plate and walked towards the table where his companions were at. Zhu Yushao pulled an empty chair. Wang Ting sat down and smiled. "You're so early. We're going back soon. I lost in the competition and have no face to go back. How can I sleep well?" Zhu Yushao sighed. She chewed on her bread as she replied. Wang Ting didn't know what to say. Zhu Yushao glanced at him and continued, "You must have slept well. After all, you won the competition hands down." All right. Look how jealous you are." Wang Ting rolled his eyes as he ate his breakfast. If you have problems with this website, please continue reading your novel on our new website myboxnovel.com. Thanks. At this moment, Dan Taixian walked over. "You are all up." "I just came," Wang Ting said. "Mph, you still have the guts to appear." Dan Taixian sneered as she looked at him from the corner of her eyes. "This lady bears grudges." Wang Ting laughed awkwardly and changed the topic. Pointing at the cake in his hand, he said, "This almond cake is not bad. Sister Xian, do you want to try it? I especially took a piece for you." Dan Taixian was speechless. She glared at Wang Ting and snatched the other piece of almond cake on his plate, taking a bite of it. Wang Ting could finally heave a sigh of relief. After they finished their breakfast, Parik suddenly came. He said, "Everyone, you might have to put your schedule on hold." "What's the matter?" Dan Taixian frowned. "Someone wants to see Mr. Wang Ting." Parik looked at Wang Ting and said, "See me?" Wang Ting pointed at himself in surprise. "Yes. Can you come with me?" Parik asked politely. Wang Ting exchanged glances with Dan Taixian. Then, he asked, "You need to tell me who wants to see me. I don't have time to waste." Parik hesitated for some time. He didn't reply to him, but he pointed in the direction of the peak of Mount Saint. Wang Ting was astounded. Parik was hinting to him that someone on the peak wanted to see him. Since he wasn't willing to say who it was, the person's identity must be extremely special. Wang Ting had an idea of who it was. Dan Taixian and the others were shocked too. It was difficult to see the important figures of Mount Saint, but they wanted to meet Wang Ting. "Did they say why?" Dan Taixian asked. "How would I know?" Parik gave a bitter smile. Dan Taixian was hesitant. Who knew what those people wanted? She felt worried about letting Wang Ting go alone. Noticing her apprehension, Parik said, "Miss Dan, don't worry. Mount Saint will definitely ensure Wang Ting's safety. We are inviting him up the mountain because someone wants to chat with him." Dan Taixian opened her mouth. Words were empty. Anyone could say it. It didn't guarantee anything. However, Wang Ting said, "It's all right, I'll go with him. I wonder which important figure wants to see me. Mount Saint is filled with formidable warriors. Don't act on impulse." Dan Taixian frowned. She spoke to him using voice transmission. "Don't worry. This is Mount Saint. If anything happens to me, their reputation will be destroyed. Also, they're not some evil clan. They won't attack me for no reason." Wang Ting added using voice transmission. "Also, don't you want to know what they have up their sleeves? In that case, be careful. Mount Saint is mysterious. Don't create troubles." Dan Taixian agreed with him, so she let him go. However, she was still worried. She knew that Wang Ting wasn't an obedient boy. Wang Ting felt exasperated. It seemed impossible to change his image in Dan Taixian's mind. "Let's go." He walked out of the hotel. After they walked away, Mu Zhigua finally whispered, "Will it really be all right? It shouldn't be a problem." Dan Taixian shook her head and asked everyone to go back to their rooms to wait for him. Wang Ting followed Parik up the mountain. They walked past the Colosseum and arrived at the last section of the stone staircase heading to the peak. Someone was already waiting there. "You're here," the person said. "High Priest." Wang Ting was surprised. "Are you the one looking for me?" "No, I came to bring you up the mountain." The High Priest shook his head. There was confusion in his eyes too. He didn't understand why that person wanted to meet Wang Ting. Wang Ting had showcased outstanding abilities in this exchange and was way ahead of the other talented martial warriors. However, the difference in status between him and that person was vast. Wang Ting glanced up uncontrollably when he heard this. He saw the 12 palaces situated on the path that was winding up the mountain, all the way until it reached the holy temple at the peak. I heard that if a normal person wants to go up the mountain, they need to challenge the 12 zodiac palaces. Do I have to do that? Wang Ting asked. If he needed to, he would turn around and leave. He was interested to fight with the 12 holy knights and get some attribute bubbles from them, but that didn't mean that he was willing to be led by the nose by someone. Even if that someone was from Mount Saint. You don't need to. The high priest shook his head. He raised his feet and walked up, his voice floating over from the front. Follow me. Wang Ting hesitated and glanced at Parik. I'll be stopping here. You can go ahead, Parik said. Wang Ting nodded and caught up with the high priest slowly. They climbed the stairs in silence. Huh! As they walked, Wang Ting let out a surprised gasp. He felt a little stunned. The first zodiac palace seemed very near. Yet they hadn't reached it even though they had been walking for some time. There's something strange about this path, he thought to himself silently. This got him a little interested. Chapter 624. The 12 zodiac palaces. The mountain might seem near, but it was, in fact, far away. This saying seemed applicable here. This phrase appeared in Wang Ting's mind as he followed the high priest up the stairs. He released a few wisps of spiritual power to uncover the secret of this mountain path. After some time, he understood. There were runes covering this path, just like the small town below. They could extend space and elongate an extremely short path a few times up to a few hundred times. There weren't many people in this world who had a higher realm of spiritual power than Wang Ting. As long as he wanted to hide, no one would discover it. Even the high priest, who was only a few steps away, didn't sense anything. Wang Ting was very interested in this space extension rune. He had gained space rune knowledge in the Darkland, but it wasn't complete. This space extension rune would be able to help him build up his rune mastery. The mountain path wasn't endless. Half an hour later, they arrived at the first palace, the Aries Palace. Wang Ting could faintly sense the powerful aura inside the palace even before he saw the person. Froze, why are you here? A voice echoed out from the palace. I received an order to bring someone up, the high priest, Froze, said. With a wave of his hand, a silver-white light shot out from his long gown and flew into the Aries Palace. There was silence for a few seconds. Then, the voice was heard again. You can proceed. Let's go. The high priest walked into the palace. Wang Ting followed behind him and entered the palace. He sized up his surroundings curiously. The structure of this palace was extremely strange. There were pillars on both sides, forming a long passageway in the middle. You could continue heading up the mountain through this path. Behind the pillars, it was pitch black. Nothing could be seen. The holy knight in the palace wasn't visible either. However, this wasn't a problem for Wang Ting. He activated his spiritual sight and scanned the darkness. Immediately, he saw a figure sitting cross-legged in the dark. He was giving off a thick green light. It was dazzling. But Wang Ting only glanced at him for a second because his gaze was quickly attracted by the piles of attribute bubbles around the person. There were so many of them. Seriously. The entire ground was filled with bubbles floating silently in the dark palace. If you have problems with this website, please continue reading your novel on our new website myboxnovel.com. Thanks. Wang Ting was dumbfounded. He didn't expect such a large number of attribute bubbles to appear in the palace. Soon, his astonishment was taken over by joy. This was an unexpected gain. He would be stupid not to take it. He released his spiritual power silently and swept all the attribute bubbles over. He picked every single one of them up. Wood Force *65 Wood Force *80 Ultimate Stage Wood Talent *12 Spiritual Realm Spirit *45 Spiritual Realm Enlightenment *60 After picking up the surprise present, Wang Ting couldn't hide his smile anymore. He received 3,570 points of Wood Force, 320 points of ultimate stage wood talent, 450 points of spiritual realm spirit, and 478 points of spiritual realm enlightenment. As the attribute bubbles merged into his body, Wang Ting suddenly shuddered. This wood force took a leap and reached the 11-star low-tier general stage. Wood force, 350-20,000, 11-star. Wang Ting's expression was weird. Did he just achieve a breakthrough? All he did was follow the high priest up the mountain to see someone. He didn't plan on collecting attributes. This result was a little unexpected. He achieved his breakthrough so suddenly. You couldn't stop luck when it wanted to come. Wang Ting felt emotional. By now, he had already reached the end of the passageway with the high priest. His breakthrough happened without any extra effort from him, so it didn't cause any commotion. No one would notice anything. Although the person in the palace was paying attention to Wang Ting, he didn't notice anything amiss either. For some reason, I think he saw me just now, the person sitting in the dark muttered to himself softly, feeling a little shocked. After Wang Ting and the high priest left, he closed his eyes and got back to cultivating. Attribute bubbles started appearing in the palace again. These attribute bubbles seemed to be bound by a certain force. They could exist for a longer time. Wang Ting followed the high priest and arrived at the second palace, the Taurus Palace. He felt a little excited. There were so many attribute bubbles in the first palace. What about the next one? Just thinking about it got him restless. If he could raise all his forces by a level after passing the 12 zodiac palaces, that would be amazing. Half an hour later, they arrived outside the Taurus Palace. The high priest threw the white light out again, and they were allowed to pass. Wang Ting had already noticed that this white light was a token. When they walked through the first palace, the holy knight from the Aries Palace had returned it to the high priest. In the Taurus Palace, a lofty and bulky figure blocked the two of them. He looked at Wang Ting with interest. The talent from country Xia. A strong voice came out of his mouth. Arudis, what are you doing? The high priest frowned. Nothing. I heard that there was an extremely outstanding talent from country Xia this time, so I came to take a look. Arudis crossed his arms and smiled. Is this Mount Saint's intention? Wang Ting smiled and turned to look at the high priest. No, please don't misunderstand. This is Arudis' own doing. It's got nothing to do with Mount Saint, the high priest explained hurriedly. Then, he turned and said to Arudis, Arudis, he's a guest of the goddess. How dare you stop him? Receive a punch from me and you can pass. Arudis didn't relent. How dare you? Shouted the high priest. Wang Ting suddenly stretched his hand out and stopped him. Smiling, he looked at Arudis. What if I don't want to? You cannot pass, Arudis replied. In that case, I'll go back. You can explain to the goddess yourself. Wang Ting turned around and left immediately. The corners of Arudis' lips twitched. Was he leaving just like that? As a genius, shouldn't he get angry when provoked? Damn it, why wasn't he going by the script? Wait. Arudis shouted hurriedly when he saw Wang Ting walking further away. However, Wang Ting continued walking as if he didn't hear anything. He had almost reached the entrance of the palace. Arudis was agitated. If Wang Ting left, all he could do was wait for the punishment by the higher authorities and lose his position as a holy knight. He took a large step forward and vanished from the spot before reappearing in front of Wang Ting. Move. Wang Ting released his fist expressionlessly. Boom. An overwhelming fist aura rose into the air amidst the explosion. Only this fist was left in Arudis' vision. Everything else had disappeared. He was flabbergasted. However, there was nothing he could say at this point. He gritted his teeth and released the force in his body. He raised his fist and punched it. Bang! When the two fists collided, Arudis flew back uncontrollably and vomited a mouthful of blood in midair. He had fallen out of the Taurus Palace. Chapter 625, Divine Constellation Armor Bang. Arudis was slammed out of the Taurus Palace, the impact shattering the stone stairs in front of the entrance. The first palace, the Aries Palace, looked a little old and dilapidated too. It appeared ancient and time-beaten. However, the material of these sculptures was strong and sturdy. There might be cracks, but they wouldn't shatter easily. However, after Arudis landed on the stairs, a large crack had appeared on the stone stairs. There was silence. Arudis raised his head in shock, staring at the entrance of the Taurus Palace. His expression changed continuously. As the holy knight guarding the Taurus Palace, he was thrown out of his own palace. How humiliating and sarcastic it was. The palace and its guardians existed together. If one was gone, so would the other. No holy knight had ever been kicked out of their own palace. If this piece of news was leaked out, he would be the disgrace of all previous 12 holy knights guarding the zodiac palaces. Splurt. Thinking about this, Arudis' face turned black. Then, it turned red and green, and he vomited a mouthful of blood. Fro sighed helplessly. He wanted to step out to help Arudis, but he stopped. Everything happened too quickly. He didn't think that Wang Ting would attack so decisively and ruthlessly because of this argument. He didn't expect him to be this powerful either. As a holy knight, Arudis couldn't even handle one punch from Wang Ting and was thrown out of the palace. He didn't have the time to stop either of them. He could only watch things unfold in front of him. It was too late to say anything now. He couldn't blame Wang Ting. He didn't instigate the fight after all. He could only blame Arudis for being too reckless and arrogant. Did he think that he could look down on all the other martial warriors in the world just because he was a holy knight? This talent from country Shia had beaten all his opponents in the exchange. Even if Arudis didn't see it personally, he must have heard of it. As a talent himself, it was normal for him to be unconvinced. That was why he provoked Wang Ting today. Froze cursed Arudis many times in his heart. Brainless fellow. The top talents of the various nations were truly formidable martial warriors. They had earned their reputation with their sweat, blood, and hard work. If anyone thought that they were too weak because they lost to Wang Ting, they would be stupid. Arudis had this thought. That was why he underestimated Wang Ting. If you have problems with this website, please continue reading your novel on our new website myboxnovel.com. Thanks. Wang Ting didn't even look at him. He walked out of the palace calmly as if he had just flicked an ant blocking his way. He wasn't worried that Mount Saint would be unhappy with his actions. They were the ones who invited him. He didn't want to come in the first place. If this was how they treated their guest, he had nothing to say. He would fight his way out if he had to. When was he afraid of anyone? Arudis half kneeled on the ground with his head lowered. Fresh blood dripped down the edge of his lips, but he remained silent. Wang Ting walked past Arudis without stopping. Boom! Suddenly, an indomitable aura exploded behind him. It was like the rise of an ancient divine beast. Stop right there. A hoarse and low voice sounded in his ears. Wang Ting stopped in his tracks. He turned his head and looked at the other party expressionlessly. Arudis was submerged in a golden light as if a golden flame was burning him from within. Wisps of powerful aura gathered behind him. Right then, the palace behind him was activated, spreading out an ancient and immense force of presence. It slowly merged with Arudis' aura. Arudis, you're crazy. Frose's expression changed as he shouted. He seemed to know what was going on. Froze, this is my fault. I will seek my punishment later at the Holy Temple. However, the reputation of the Holy Knights mustn't be tainted, Arudis said sternly without turning his head. You. Froze wanted to say something, but he just sighed in the end. Wang Ting looked at them and knew that words were useless in this situation. There was no point emphasizing that he was a guest anymore. Suddenly, a sonic boom rang through the palace. Wang Ting raised his head and looked inside. A golden light was rising quickly in the darkness behind the pillar. He saw a golden raging bull charging towards them. The golden light traveled at the speed of lightning, arriving in front of him in the blink of an eye. It slammed into Arudis' body and merged with the golden force glow around him. In an instant, golden light lit up the entire palace. The light gradually receded after some time, revealing Arudis' appearance. A golden armor had appeared on his body, from head to toe, battle boots, kneelet, cuirass, braces, shoulder pads, helmet. This golden armor covered Arudis entirely. His aura shot up as he merged with the palace behind him. It soared right into the air. An outline of a raging bull seemed to have appeared behind Arudis. The change here naturally caught the attention of the other holy knights. The majestic figures sitting inside the remaining 11 palaces opened their eyes. Their gazes passed through the obstacles in front of them as they stared in the direction of the Taurus Palace. At the same time, deep inside the holy temple at the peak of Mount Saint, there was a tall and enormous sculpture erected inside a large hall. Below this sculpture, a young lady was praying with closed eyes. There was a holy aura on her face. But at this moment, her eyebrows trembled slightly, and she opened her eyes slowly. There seemed to be a universe contained in her pitch-black eyes. They were deep and endless. Taurus Palace. Sensing a majestic aura coming from Arudis' body, Wang Teng was astounded. This armor must be extraordinary. This is the divine constellation armor worn by all the holy knights. Arudis' voice resounded in the area. Divine constellation armor. Wang Teng's eyes shimmered. Normally, a holy knight will only wear it when the holy temple is in danger. However, this affects the honor of the holy knights, so I have to wear it today. You're very strong. I can only fight with you if I wear this armor. Today, you will have to fight, whether you like it or not. As he spoke, his voice increased in volume. At the end, it was as loud as thunder, shaking the air around them and shattering their eardrums. Fight. A sharp gaze shot out of his eyes. He roared in anger and took a step forward. Boom. The next instant, the ground vibrated as if a gigantic raging bull had stomped its feet. The entire mountain was shaking. Golden force erupted from Arudis' body as glaring light gathered on his fist. His fist shone brightly. A large amount of force was compressed into this punch. The golden raging bull illusion also appeared and charged forward with the punch. Boom. The scene was astonishing. Yet, Wang Teng wasn't affected. He raised his head and stared emotionlessly at Arudis, who was a head taller than him. The forces of the 5 basic elements started flowing through his body before ending on his fists. Fist conscious surged out. The 5 elements reinforced and restrained one another, forming a close circuit. Chapter 626. I don't feel like leaving suddenly. 5-element fist. His 5-element fist conscious covered his hands, twirling around them furiously. At this moment, the aura around Wang Teng was climbing. Within a split second, it had shot through the roof. A tornado seemed to be stirring up around him. The clouds in the sky tossed and turned, forming a whirlpool. Wang Teng stood erected in the middle of the whirlpool. This was the true power of his 5-element fist conscious. He had finally executed it. His opponent, Arudis, in the divine constellation armor was worth this attack. The forces of the 5 elements around him were drawn over and merged into the windstorm. It was a majestic and grand scene. Froze trembled. He raised his head and looked up in astonishment before staring at Wang Teng as if he had seen a ghost. Was this his true ability? He didn't reveal his true power during the exchange. At this moment, the other 11 holy knights raised their heads too and looked up at the sky. They felt the sudden appearance of a formidable aura and were flabbergasted. Who was it? Not only did he force Arudis to use the divine constellation armor, but he also possessed such powerful ability. In front of the Taurus Palace, Wang Teng's black hair danced wildly in the wind. He stood in the center of the tornado with his arms raised in front of him. He released his fist. Boom. The earth shook and the clouds rumbled. The entire power of heaven and earth seemed to have gathered into this single punch. It overpowered everything. The entire place was silent. The entire universe was silent. It was as if the world was inhabited by boundless and majestic power. All the beings within a few hundred meters in radius seemed to have run away. Arudis squinted. He was thunderstruck. However, the arrow was already loose. He couldn't take it back. Moo. The outline of the raging bull looked up at the sky and bellowed. Then, it crashed into Wang Teng's immense fist glow. Boom, boom, boom. If you have problems with this website, Please continue reading your novel on our new website myboxnovel.com. Thanks. The two fists created earth-shattering explosions when they collided. The ground vibrated, including the Taurus palace behind them. A frightening gale swept through the air. Froze, who was closer to them, suffered the brunt of the aftermath. He took 3 steps back uncontrollably and squinted his eyes as he faced the residual force of the collision. Bang! A figure suddenly flew out from the center. Arudis. He slammed violently in the wall of the Taurus palace, breaking multiple pillars, reducing them to broken stones. The victor was decided with a single punch. Crack! The battle armor on Arudis' body seemed to be groaning in protest. Cracks had appeared on the surface and were spreading out like spiderwebs. This punch was so frightening. Arudis raised his head with difficulty, his face filled with disbelief. He lost. He lost completely. No luck was involved. He could say that he was careless before, but he couldn't find any excuses now. He lost. Despite wearing the divine constellation armor, he couldn't change this fact. Moreover, the divine constellation armor was damaged. This was the divine constellation armor. It was made by legendary ancient blacksmiths using star bones and a variety of precious and rare materials. It was the divine constellation armor that bore the entire power of the Taurus Palace runes. Yet, it cracked after Wang Ting's punch. And that was not all. The divine constellation armor of the Taurus Palace was known for its formidable strength. Its ultimate power was its strength. Yet, it lost in a head-on strength battle. How powerful was Wang Ting's physique? Arudis was in a daze. Getting defeated in his specialization was a huge blow for him. Froze was at a loss for words too. He looked at Wang Ting in bewilderment. Was this fellow a human? He knew how powerful the divine constellation armors were. After the Holy Knights wore them, their abilities would increase by many times. Yet, Arudis still lost. At this moment, the clouds in the sky dispersed and calmness resumed. It was as if nothing had happened. Wang Ting's black hair floated down. They weren't dancing wildly in the air anymore. His expression was calm as he looked at the holy temple above him. Suddenly, he raised his leg and stepped forward. He walked past Arudis without looking at him, just like what he did some time ago. You. Arudis' face was pale. He felt extremely humiliated. Wang Ting didn't stop, though. He crossed this holy night and went straight through the Taurus Palace, continuing his journey up the mountain. Froze was stunned. Didn't he say that he was leaving? Why was he going up again? The next instant, his expression changed. He understood what Wang Ting was thinking and caught up with him hurriedly. He asked agitatedly, "What are you planning to do?" "I don't feel like leaving suddenly." "You want to fight, right?" "All right, I'll fight my way up then." There was no expression on his face, and his voice was unruly and cold. He climbed up the stairs one step at a time. Froze's expression changed. This was a huge matter. This fellow looked so harmless a moment ago, but now, he had turned into a devil, arrogant, unruly, and supercilious. He wanted to fight all the 12 zodiac palaces. In the past, if he had heard someone wanting to barge through the 12 zodiac palaces, he would scoff at them. To an ordinary martial warrior, beating one zodiac palace was difficult enough. But now, Froze had a bad premonition. Wang Ting could defeat Arudis with one punch. What about the other holy knights? Who could stop him? Froze didn't dare to think further. He chased after Wang Ting and said anxiously, "We can sit down and have a proper chat. This was an accident. Arudis just wanted to have a duel with you. He had no evil intention and has received his punishment already. Please don't take it to heart. No one will stop you anymore. That's what you said at the start, but look at what happened." Wang Ting snorted. He wasn't convinced. "I will fight the 12 zodiac palaces. I've already passed the first palace and he didn't stop me. I don't want to go back and look for trouble, but I will fight the rest of the 10 palaces." Froze felt bitter and cursed Arudis 1,000 times in his heart. All these troubles were started by him. He had caused them great harm. However, he couldn't stop Wang Ting. He could only hope that the other holy knights could defeat him. There were a few who were many times more powerful than Arudis. Their battle abilities were within the top 10 of Mount Saint and were the strongest guardians of the palaces. Wang Ting counted his gains as he walked up the mountain. Metal Force *56 Metal Force *45 Metal Force *90 Spiritual Realm Enlightenment *76 Spiritual Realm Spirit *80 Spiritual Realm Enlightenment *50 Spiritual Realm Spirit *62 Ultimate Stage. Metal Talent *12 Raging Bull Fist Conscious *360 Just like the Ares Palace, there were numerous attribute bubbles scattered in the Taurus Palace. Wang Ting picked up all of them. His metal force rose tremendously. He was right at the doorstep of the 11-star low-tier general stage. As the remaining attribute bubbles merged into his body, Wang Ting shuddered and entered the 11-star low-tier general stage silently. Metal Force, 120,000, 11-star, froze knew nothing. One single match was enough to cause a huge change in Wang Ting. Who would believe such an unbelievable thing? He didn't even know what Wang Ting was making a fuss out of nothing. His real aim was to collect more attributes from all the holy knights of the zodiac palaces. Chapter 627. I have an immature idea. Wang Ting walked along the path that was rarely traversed. He looked as if he was just taking a stroll after his meal. But the high priest, who was a few steps behind him, was walking on tenterhooks. He was in despair. He wanted to report this matter to the Holy Temple, but he couldn't leave Wang Ting alone and go up by himself. This would make Mount Saint appear extremely low class. Hence, he could only follow Wang Ting obediently and walked up the stairs. They had switched their positions. In the past, he was the one leading the way, but now, Wang Ting was in front. This fellow had reversed the position of the host and the guest. Froze felt helpless. After interacting with Wang Ting firsthand, he understood how hard this person was to deal with. The guy's temperament had shocked him. From what he saw, Wang Ting's arrogance came from deep within. He wouldn't allow anyone to step on it. If anyone touched his bottom line, Arudis would be an example of that person's ending. Also, he was extremely decisive. His actions were as fast as lightning, catching people off guard. However, during normal times, he hid well and didn't reveal any of his real personality. He acted like a happy-go-lucky person who could have fun and fool around with ordinary people. His personality was like a sharp sword hidden in its sheath. Once someone stimulated him, the sword would release its dazzling sharp aura and hurt whoever provoked him. This temperament wasn't like a 20-years-old young man at all. Wang Ting didn't know what Froze was thinking. At this moment, he was wondering about the armor he saw. When he saw Arudis putting on that armor just now, he couldn't help but recall an anime from his past life. The settings were similar, but there were some differences too. Wang Ting suddenly thought of a saying. There was a rumor that the inspiration for anime and movies came from some blurry images seen by the creator when they came into contact with the messages released during the collision of an alternate world and reality. They added in their imaginations and kept filling in the gaps, along with some artistic modifications. This was how the final product appeared in front of everyone. So, a certain anime author felt the messages released by this world. Wang Ting's expression turned strange. He found the notion outrageous, but it made some sense. He shook his head. There was no right answer for this, so he shouldn't waste his time. Coming back, based on what Arudis said, this divine constellation armor was worn by all generations of holy knights. Who made these divine constellation armors? Just now, he could faintly feel the mysterious and veiled relationship between the divine constellation armors and the 12 zodiac palaces. From what he knew, the 12 zodiac palaces had existed for an extremely long time, their history dating back to a few thousand years. If you have problems with this website, please continue reading your novel on our new website myboxnovel.com. Thanks. What did this mean? This meant that the divine constellation armors might have existed for a few thousand years too. But there was a paradox. Before the Force invaded Earth, before the martial arts era started, how could this item, which belonged to martial warriors, appear? Unless Mount Saint was the legacy of an ancient civilization, the divine constellation armor was left by the ancient civilization too. This was possible. Mount Saint gave off a mysterious aura, so it was normal that it had some secrets. Unfortunately, the divine constellation armors belonged to Mount Saint. If he could take one or two back to study, there would definitely be huge gains. As a master blacksmith, he might be able to discover some secrets from it. He had seen how powerful the divine constellation armor was. Arudis was only a low-tier general stage martial warrior. However, after wearing the divine constellation armor, his ability rose multiple times. If he was able to learn the skill of creating this armor, he could go back to his country, gather some master-level disciples, and ask them to craft this battle armor. In the future, the martial warriors in country Xia could wear one each. How powerful would they be? What a pity. Wang Ting shook his head uncontrollably. Froze saw his expression and asked, "Why are you shaking your head?" "Nothing. I had an immature thought." Wang Ting glanced at him and replied calmly. Froze didn't think that Wang Ting would have the guts to lay his eyes on the divine constellation armors. Since he didn't want to say anything, he didn't probe further. After some time, the third Gemini Palace was in sight. Froze wanted to show his token, but Wang Ting stopped him. "No need. When I said I want to fight my way up, I meant it. It doesn't matter if you show your token." Froze felt helpless. He could only watch Wang Ting as he stepped into the Gemini Palace confidently. The moment Wang Ting walked into the palace, he stopped, looking in front. Someone was blocking him. The other party was a tall and valiant man above 30 years old. He had long hair, and his expression was calm and indifferent. He looked like a high and mighty god. "This fellow is worse than the first two holy knights. Look at his posture," Wang Ting complained in his heart. At the same time, his attention landed on his opponent's body. He moved his gaze down slowly. He noticed that the holy knight was already wearing golden armor. He looked sacred and divine. This armor was different from the one Arudis wore. It was even stranger. The armor had sharp edges with complicated patterns. There were two faces on the two sides of the helmet, one angel and one devil. They were like twins. "I know your intention." The Holy Knight of the Gemini Palace looked at Wang Ting and said calmly, "That's good. I don't have to waste time explaining. Let's fight." Wang Ting released his force and said. Froze caught up with them and said to Carl using voice transmission, "Carl, try your best to stop him." He briefly explained what happened before. As expected, that idiot Arudis was defeated. Carl nodded and stopped speaking. Boom. The next instant, a powerful force wave erupted from Cole's body. "This is my job. If you want to pass, you must defeat me." The instant he finished speaking, Carl dashed towards Wang Ting. Wang Ting's eyes shimmered. He released his fist and received his opponent's attack with a loud bang. The two of them flashed around the palace, colliding, intertwining, and punching each other. Their figures turned into lingering shadows. It was impossible to tell which was the real person. Froze watched their fight with his mouth agape. Wang Ting was outrageously powerful. Carl was in the top 5 among the Holy Knights. Yet when Wang Ting fought with him, he wasn't any weaker. Boom. The two of them collided in mid-air and retreated. Cole's face turned grim. He admitted that he had underestimated Wang Ting. But this thought was no longer present. No wonder Arudis lost. Even he had to be cautious when facing this opponent. However, he was getting a little excited. This was the thrill of meeting his match. Chapter 628, Don't Teach a Fish to Swim. Day after day, year after year, the Holy Knights had been guarding the 12 zodiac palaces. They rarely had the opportunity to spar with martial warriors from around the world. Wang Ting's sudden arrival had ignited the Gemini Palace's Holy Knights' intense fighting spirit. Cole's battle conscious wrapped around his force, and a pair of Gemini phantoms emerged behind him. Wang Ting raised his head. A strange expression appeared on his face when his gaze landed on the phantoms. Suddenly, the Gemini phantoms, who were holding each other's hands, opened their eyes, and 2 rays of red and blue shot out from them. A deep and strange spiritual power pierced into Wang Ting's sea of consciousness. Wang Ting's consciousness shook, and the scene in front of him changed drastically. In the sky, the Gemini phantoms transformed into an angel and a devil. They held their weapons and stabbed him. The angel's face was sacred and loving. Anyone who saw it would not be able to put up any resistance. Behind it were the radiant gates of heaven, and chants in Sanskrit could be heard. There were unknown petals drifting in all directions. The devil, however, had a hideous face full of evil. Anyone who saw it would have evil thoughts in their minds, and the monster within them would surface from the depths of their hearts. Behind it was the vast underworld. Darkness covered the skies, and wild shrieks and howls constantly spooked the listeners as though hell had really descended upon them. Wang Ting was caught under it, and it looked like he would be destroyed in an instant. Froze heaved a sigh of relief when he saw that Wang Ting was going to be defeated. Those who didn't understand Cole's move, very few would be able to stop it. Even amongst the people in Mount Saint, only a few could face his attack. He looked over at Wang Ting and was astounded. Despite facing such a situation, Wang Ting's expression was unchanged. He looked at the scene of heaven and hell, and you could feel the disdain he had from the corner of his mouth. Froze almost thought that his eyes had fooled him. However, Wang Ting's smile was indeed filled with scorn and contempt. Was he really mocking Carl? Froze was flustered. He couldn't understand Wang Ting's thoughts. Did he have any moves that could dispel Cole's attack? As soon as he thought about that, Froze's heart skipped a beat. You want to play with me using spiritual power? Don't teach a fish to swim. Wang Ting sneered and concentrated his gaze. The spiritual power entrenched in his consciousness poured out instantly. Boom. If you have problems with this website, please continue reading your novel on our new website myboxnovel.com. Thanks. The immense spiritual power erupted from within like a torrent and a dragon's roar. The angel and demon bore the brunt of the gush of spiritual power and were immediately crushed into bits. The gates of heaven and the underworld cracked under the intense quaking. When the torrent of spiritual power slammed through them, they were torn apart. All the illusions vanished. The Gemini Palace was still the Gemini Palace. There were no gates of heaven nor the underworld. They were all just illusions that had been dispelled. Tap, tap, tap. Carl seemed to have suffered some kind of shock as he retreated back a few steps. His face was extremely pale, and there were layers of cold sweat dripping from his forehead. Impossible. How did you overcome my Gemini phantom fist? He looked at Wang Ting in disbelief, no longer indifferent and arrogant. Gemini phantom fist. Wang Ting's gaze flickered as he looked at the attribute bubbles on the ground. He picked them up. Emperor Realm Spirit *80 Emperor Realm Spirit *103 Emperor Realm Enlightenment *65 Water Force *130 Gemini Phantom Fist *35 As the attribute bubbles were absorbed into his mind, Wang Ting's heart became clear, and he was immediately enlightened. In his mind, a human-shaped figure appeared and practiced a set of punching techniques. Spiritual power and force were circulating around that figure. Wang Ting took it all in and learned it immediately. So that's what the Gemini Phantom Fist was. He had a sudden realization. Gemini Phantom Fist was a peculiar technique that combined spiritual power and battle techniques, its attacks accompanied by spiritual power. People who were not strong in their spirit would be hit in an instant, and it would be extremely difficult to deal with. However, it was a pity that Carl encountered a monster like Wang Ting. His spiritual power was already in the Imperial realm. Attacking him with spiritual power was akin to a young child swinging his sword in front of an adult. However, Carl wasn't considered weak as he had already reached the Emperor realm. It's not impossible. You have lost. Wang Ting had obtained the technique and said lightly, "No, your spiritual power." Cole's face was horrified as he suddenly thought of something. To be able to overcome his Gemini Phantom Fist, the other party's spiritual power must be extremely powerful. Wang Ting's spiritual power would definitely be stronger than his. Froze had also thought about this and couldn't help but swallow his saliva. He had learned that Wang Ting was a divine spirit master during the exchange event. This meant that his spiritual power would be anything but weak. Still, he never imagined it to be stronger than Cole's. Froze remembered that sneer on Wang Ting's face when he was facing Cole's Gemini Phantom Fist. No wonder. In the face of his immense spiritual power, Cole's Gemini Phantom Fist was just an embarrassment to himself. What stage has your spiritual power reached? Carl asked anxiously. Froze also wanted to know the heights Wang Ting's spiritual power had reached. If it was the Emperor realm, it would still be reasonable. If it was the Imperial realm, then he didn't dare to think about it. No comments. Wang Ting wasn't that stupid to reveal his trump card to others. He didn't stay any longer as he turned and walked outside of the palace. At the same time, he didn't forget to pick up the attribute bubbles that were scattered all around the palace. Emperor Realm Spirit *35 Emperor Realm Spirit *40 Emperor Realm Spirit *48 Emperor Realm Enlightenment *65 Emperor Realm Enlightenment *38 Water Force *50 Water Force *35 Wang Teng's gaze flickered. There's something wrong with these palaces. There were a lot of attribute bubbles in almost every palace. Originally, these attribute bubbles should have disappeared in a short time if they were not collected. That wasn't the case for the attribute bubbles in the palace, though. They seemed to be locked up by some mysterious force. Although they would still disappear, they stayed longer than usual. But to Wang Teng, it was a great thing. From the first palace to the current one, 2 of his attributes had reached the 11-star low-tier general stage. And he had gained a lot in the Gemini Palace. His water force had reached the 11-star low-tier general stage, and his spiritual power had also seen a lot of improvement. Water force, 860-20,000, 11-star, enlightenment, 503-3000, Imperial Realm, Spirit, 512-3000, Imperial Realm, even his enlightenment had improved. Both his spirit and enlightenment had exceeded the 500-point mark. That was really not easy. It was a step forward in the long journey ahead. After collecting the attribute bubbles, Wang Teng didn't linger any longer. He walked out of the Gemini Palace and headed for the next one. Froze looked at Carl and saw his depressed state. He wanted to comfort him, but he didn't know where to start or how to speak to him. In the end, he could only pat him on the shoulder. He then hurriedly followed Wang Teng, who had already disappeared from his view. Chapter 629, Anyone Here? Cancer Palace. The Cancer Palace was the 4th Zodiac Palace. After getting here, Wang Ting stepped into the palace without any hesitation. He was extremely curious what benefits this Cancer Palace Holy Night would give him. Challenging the 12 Zodiac Palaces wasn't a face value issue anymore. It was a question of how high his ability could rise. It would be great if he could improve by a realm every time he beat a Holy Night. As long as the benefits were enough, his face would come back. If it couldn't, nothing could be done about it. He still wanted his face. Beating the 12 Zodiac Palaces would give him his dignity back. After all, as a top talent, his dignity was still important. He mustn't get bullied easily. Froze followed behind him, not knowing what Wang Teng was thinking. If he knew, he might vomit blood on the spot. The guy wanted to beat all 12 Zodiac Palaces just because a rudist stopped him. Was his dignity so high? Froze was worried. Margus, the Holy Knight guarding the Cancer Palace, was on par with Carl in terms of ability. However, his skills were a little unique. Froze wondered if he could stop Wang Ting. The Cancer Palace was pitch black. Even the lights at the end of the passageway couldn't shine in. It was as if all the light had been swallowed. The Holy Knight was nowhere in sight. No one stopped him either. Wang Ting stopped walking 4 steps away from the entrance. Looking in from his position, he couldn't see the other end of the passageway. Everywhere he looked was pitch black. He activated his spiritual sight and looked into the darkness. He frowned. The darkness in the Cancer Palace blocked his vision. This was the first time. He felt a little excited. Unknown things were worth exploring. Normal attributes were gains without soul. He had no interest in them. It looked like he could get a good harvest here. There might even be surprises. Wang Teng smiled. The next instant, he stepped into the darkness in front. The moment he entered, he was submerged in it completely. Froze, who was behind him, couldn't see him anymore. Froze stopped walking. He remained at the same spot and waited for the result of the fight. Wang Teng stepped forward slowly in the darkness. His expression was composed. Other people might get exasperated and fearful after staying in this dark and enclosed space for some time. If you have problems with this website, please continue reading your novel on our new website myboxnovel.com. Thanks. Never underestimate the power of darkness. There might be nothing here except endless darkness, but no one would be able to maintain their composure after staying here for too long. If someone didn't break down, that must be because they hadn't stayed here for long enough. It could be explained if one had personally experienced it. Waking up in the middle of the night to visit the bathroom and the light suddenly turned off, the person would have no choice but to grope around the dark. At some point, they would stop walking because they had felt something peeking at them through the darkness. Wang Teng was experiencing the same situation. He seemed to have walked in the darkness for a long time, but there was no end to it. He felt something around him staring at him with an evil gaze, wanting to drag him into the darkness. He wasn't afraid, though. He knew that this was the doings of the Holy Knight of the Cancer Palace. He was just a little surprised. The Holy Knight of the Cancer Palace was indeed powerful. After all, he could create this darkness. Is there anyone here? Wang Teng opened his mouth and shouted. No reply. No one would reply to him. Is there anyone here? Wang Teng asked again. If there's no one, I'll ask again 3 minutes later. No reply. The atmosphere in this dark place seemed frozen. Wang Teng continued walking forward. After some time, he shouted, Is there anyone here? The time was just right, exactly 3 minutes. The atmosphere was eerily silent. If there's no one, I'll ask again 3 minutes later, Wang Teng repeated. Another 3 minutes passed. Wang Teng shouted as promised, Is there anyone here? No reply. If there's no one, I'll ask again 3 minutes later. Is there anyone here? No reply. If there's no one, I'll ask again 3 minutes later. Wang Teng was extremely patient. He kept moving forward and shouting every 3 minutes relentlessly. It was touching and exasperating. He walked for a long time. He didn't even know how many times he had shouted. Is there anyone here? Is there anyone here? His voice echoed in the darkness. Wang Teng seemed to have gotten addicted to this game. He planned to continue shouting regardless of the other party's reply. Another 3 minutes passed. He opened his mouth again. Suddenly, green dots of light lit up in his surroundings. At the start, they were the size of peas. Gradually, they grew bigger. In the end, they turned into balls of green light and floated around Wang Teng. The sudden appearance of the green balls of light made the area even scarier. The temperature seemed to have dropped a few degrees. A soft groan sounded in the darkness, creating a sense of despair in the heart of whoever heard it. However, Wang Teng remained expressionless. He muttered to himself as if he didn't see the green balls of light around him. Indeed, there's someone here. Did he use the lights because he's afraid that I can't find my way? Why didn't he give more lights? No reply. The balls of green flame became a little unstable. They shook violently as if they were angered. What do you mean by you can't find your way? Are these green lights here to light up the place for you? Could you be a little more narcissistic? Phut, shameless. The person behind the scene couldn't take Wang Teng's chatter anymore and finally decided to act. The green balls of flames lit up the entire area in spooky light. Wang Teng finally saw his surroundings clearly. This wasn't the Cancer Palace. It was an eerie graveyard. It was desolate, dilapidated, and frightening. Suddenly, blood-stained hands broke through the ground and grabbed Wang Teng's legs. Corpses started to crawl out toward him too. Their faces were distorted and horrendous. They seemed to be filled with pain and sorrow, but there was a sinister smile on their faces. It looked terrifying. An ordinary person, even if he was a martial warrior, might not be able to face this scene calmly. However, Wang Teng remained indifferent. He didn't move and allowed the scary corpses to climb towards him. It was as if they didn't exist. Is this an illusion? Wang Teng muttered to himself. He released his spiritual power and spread it out, wanting to disperse the illusion. But to his surprise, as his spiritual power spread out, the corpses remained. They didn't disappear. Chapter 630. Mini-space tornado. This isn't an illusion? The scene gave Wang Ting a shock. He frowned uncontrollably. Why would something that didn't exist in reality appear inside the Cancer Palace? If this wasn't an illusion, what could it be? But if this was an illusion, he should be able to break it with his spiritual power unless the other person's realm was higher than his. However, that wasn't possible either. Wang Ting denied this thought instantly. He wasn't overconfident. This was just the truth. There were people who had a higher realm than him, but they probably wouldn't appear here. Mount Saint would definitely view the Imperial Realm's spiritual power with high importance. Since spiritual power is useless, then, Wang Ting's eyes shimmered. The force in his body exploded. Boom! Green flames surged out of his body along with his fire force. They swept over the corpses around him. Ah! Agonizing screams filled up the air. All the corpses were burned when they were touched by the emerald-glazed flame, turning into ashes and disappearing. These corpses were nothing in front of his divine fire. Wang Ting stood in the flames and stepped forward. Suddenly, his spiritual power, which was floating around, felt a slight emotional fluctuation at a certain part of this space. Found you. Wang Ting smiled and disappeared on the spot. Boom. The next instant, he appeared some distance in front to his left and punched the air. Bang! The punch made contact with something, creating a dull sound. Amidst the force explosion, a figure appeared out of thin air, his hands crossed in front of his chest. He stopped after taking a few steps back. This was a young man who was wearing divine constellation armor. He looked at Wang Ting grimly with bewilderment in his eyes. If you have problems with this website, please continue reading your novel on our new website myboxnovel.com. Thanks. How did you find me? Margus asked and put down his hands secretly. Force flowed through his body as he dispersed the strong tremor that had infiltrated his body. Guess. Wang Ting sized up the man and smiled. The other party thought that his slight emotional fluctuations wouldn't be discovered, but he didn't know how powerful Wang Ting's spiritual power was. This slight movement was enough for him to lock onto him. Margus was frustrated. This young man from country Shia was evil. He kept shouting, asking if anyone was here. His voice was like a spirit. He almost lost his composure because of him. What was going on in his mind? Don't you want to know where this is? Margus suddenly smiled. There was sarcasm on his face. Do you want me to ask you? Wang Ting said, I won't. Margus felt the corners of his lips twitching as he looked at that irritating face. I don't care where this is. I'll break it, Wang Ting continued calmly. How arrogant. Margus snorted. Try it. If you can get out of this place, I'll call you grandfather. Wait. Wang Ting suddenly took out his cell phone and pressed the screen. Okay, repeat what you've just said. Margus was stunned. What the hell are you doing? It's nothing. Just repeat what you've said, Wang Ting said earnestly. Are you playing with me? Margus' expression got ugly. You misunderstood me. I'm just afraid that you will regret your words later, Wang Ting replied. Regret? Margus sniggered. This is what I've said. If you can break this space, I will not only call you grandfather once, I can call you that 10 times or 100 times. I mean what I say. Very good. I like your confidence. Wang Ting kept his cell phone after he recorded his words and looked at Margus in admiration. He didn't just speak to Margus because he wanted to anger him. He was trying to get him to reveal himself. Although he didn't give much useful information, Wang Ting ascertained that this was another space. Wang Ting had an idea. This space might be a space fragment. The Holy Knight of the Cancer Palace made use of the space fragment using special means and turned it into this graveyard. He used it to control and defeat his opponent. It was a mysterious method that was hard to decipher. After all, not many people could control space. Wait, this meant that the Holy Knight of the Cancer Palace probably possessed space talent. Wang Ting's eyes lit up. He hadn't seen space attributes in a long time. Was he finally going to see them again? Margus felt a chill travel down his spine as Wang Ting stared at him. Why was his gaze so strange? He looked as if he wanted to skin him alive. Did he have some strange fetish? Wang Ting didn't plan to waste any time. The space talent, which he hadn't used in a long time, was finally activated. Using space skills to destroy space skills was the best solution. Unfortunately for Margus, Wang Ting possessed space talent too. Besides, he wasn't weak. When he stretched out his palm, space power started gathering on it. The air above his palm started vibrating and spinning. It spun faster and gradually turned into a space tornado. This was a mini space tornado. Executing a large space tornado wasn't easy, but creating a mini one was still possible. Margus was watching the show at the side, but at this moment, his eyes widened in surprise, and his eyeballs almost fell out of their sockets. Gasp! Power of space. Margus was in disbelief. He didn't expect another person to have the ability to use space power. Also, the violent spatial fluctuations above Wang Ting's palm gave him a fright. His eyebrows kept jumping, and he had a bad feeling. I must stop him, he gasped in astonishment. With this thought in mind, multiple corpses broke out from the ground and pounced on Wang Ting. He didn't sit and wait. Taking a step forward, he shot towards Wang Ting. Boom! A powerful aura swarmed towards Wang Ting. Raising his head, his emerald-glazed flame swept through the air around him and burned those corpses into ashes. Die! Margus shouted in anger and clawed Wang Ting's palm. Too late. Wang Ting flicked his finger. The mini-space tornado sank into the darkness. Boom! An instant later, explosions rocked the place as the space around them started collapsing little by little. The darkness, the corpses, the graveyard, everything turned into dots of lights and disappeared gradually. No! Margus gritted his teeth, his eyes widening in anger as he shouted furiously. His body was also swept by the spatial power during the explosions. He was thrown back violently. Froze heard his shrill cry from the outside world and shuddered. He hesitated before saying, "That sounded like Margus." The moment this thought appeared, he noticed, to his astonishment, the darkness in front of him dissipating at a fast speed. The space in front of him became distorted, sucking the darkness inside. The Cancer Palace resumed its normal appearance slowly. Chapter 631, The Master of the World. Reserve. The darkness shattered and the space collapsed. Everything returned to normal. Sunlight from outside shone in, illuminating the two figures standing in front. One was straight and tall while the other was stumbling. Frose's eyes became wide as saucers in surprise. He released a helpless sigh in his heart. The result was obvious. Margus had lost. As the High Priest, he had some understanding of Margus' skills. Currently, it seemed as if his methods had been entirely destroyed. Froze held his breath uncontrollably. Margus stabilized himself. He seemed to be in a miserable state as blood dripped down the edge of his lips. He had suffered a heavy injury. "You destroyed my death space," he said in a serious and astounded tone. Froze was flabbergasted. Wang Ting destroyed the legacy of the Cancer Palace, the death space? That was unbelievable. Death space? Wang Ting scoffed. You call that small space fragment death space? This death space was nothing compared to the dimensional rifts he saw in the past. Margus' face turned ugly. He could clearly discern the contempt in Wang Ting's voice. This emotion was real. He didn't do it on purpose. To him, his death space wasn't worth mentioning. If other people gave him this attitude, he would take it as a joke. However, this young man had destroyed his death space a moment ago. He used his ability to show that he wasn't boasting. He was stating the truth. Wang Ting didn't care about his thoughts. He scanned the surroundings and swept the attribute bubbles scattered everywhere. Space *20 space *18 space *23 space fragment *210. If you have problems with this website, please continue reading your novel on our new website myboxnovel.com. Thanks. Space fragment asterisk 240 space fragment asterisk 180 origin of soul asterisk 1 origin of soul asterisk 1 origin of soul asterisk 1. With the attribute bubbles merging into his body, Wang Teng's eyes lit up. There was happiness and surprise in his gaze. Origin of soul. This was similar to the origin of life, but it was used on his soul. Instantly, Wang Teng felt a shiver coming from the depths of his soul. It wasn't because he saw something scary. It was the result of an uncontrollable comfortable feeling deep inside his soul. He felt that his spirit was about to make some indescribable sound. As if his soul was rising up to heaven. At the same time, a new row appeared on his attributes panel. Origin of soul, 1256. Wang Teng had 1000 points of origin of soul at the start. He had added another 256 points to the total, which was slightly more than a quarter. This quarter was nothing to scoff at. Wang Teng knew how tough it was to increase the origin of soul. The origin of soul was as rare as the origin of life. Ordinary martial warriors wouldn't drop it unless there were special circumstances. This time, the increase in his origin of soul was 25% his original value. This gain was unexpectedly huge. Wang Teng didn't know if he would ever have this chance again. Anyway, why did Margus drop the origin of soul attributes? No, this wasn't right. He didn't drop the origin of soul. These attribute bubbles were dropped by the corpses in the death space. Those corpses were souls. An idea flashed in Wang Teng's mind. He finally understood the nature of the corpses. At this moment, an indescribable feeling erupted from his body. As his origin of soul increased, gentle and warm energy appeared in Wang Teng's consciousness. Boom! His spiritual power, including his entire mind, was nourished. It seemed to have risen to a higher level. Wang Teng was surprised and elated. His eyes were filled with disbelief. He looked at his attributes panel involuntarily. Spirit, 1543 3000, Imperial Realm, Enlightenment, 1522 3000, Imperial Realm. What is this? Wang Teng was astounded. His spirit and enlightenment rose by more than 1,000 points. This was unbelievable. Mind you, he had picked up countless attribute bubbles before his Imperial Realm spirit and enlightenment increased by 500 points. Yet in that short instant, both attributes rose exponentially. Wang Teng might be used to his attributes skyrocketing, but even he felt a little dreamy now. The soul affects spiritual power and talent. His eyes flickered as he pondered. Besides the origin of soul, which was a pleasant surprise, he received another present, space fragment. When he destroyed Margus' death space, space fragment attributes were dropped. This holy knight from the Cancer Palace didn't disappoint him. He was a martial warrior who possessed space talent. Such martial warriors were extremely rare. He was the only one Wang Teng had met so far. However, meeting one was good enough. He praised the resources of Mount Saint. Without them, he wouldn't be able to get hold of this rare space fragment. After absorbing all the attribute bubbles, he received 132 points of space attributes and 1250 points of space fragments. Space, 7252 10,000 space fragment, 1251 00000. Wang Teng was shocked as he looked at the space fragment row on his attributes panel, especially when he saw the question marks at the back. His mind was full of question marks too. The upper limit of the space fragment attribute was so high. Could it be that there was no limit? Wang Teng thought for a moment and understood the reason. Space could be infinitely big. At this moment, his consciousness sunk into a certain area in his mind. A special alternate world had appeared there. This was space fragment. This was a small and new space. Small was relative, but it wasn't big. It was around the size of a stadium, about the same size as Margus' death space. However, it was still bigger than his space ring. This was a good place to store his items. That wasn't its only use either. He would be wasting this gift if he used it to store items. When Wang Teng's consciousness entered the area, he felt like he was the god of this place. He was in control of everything here. He also sensed that this space was different from the other storage spaces. There was life in it. No wonder there were so many bodies of souls in Margus' death space. Bodies of souls were undoubtedly a form of life. Suddenly, Wang Ting shuddered. Since he possessed a space with life, would he be able to create a new world if he expanded this space infinitely? Wang Ting frightened himself with this thought. A new world. To think he dared to think about it. But it made sense. A vast space with life inside. Any living creature could survive inside. Wasn't this a world? Wang Teng would be the only god of this world. He would be the master of everyone. Wouldn't he be the master of the world? This state was extremely far away, but he could call himself the master of the world now, or a reserve. Wang Teng started panting a little. He couldn't help but get excited after seeing a path with endless possibilities. Chapter 632, Abyss Burial. The master of the world. Just thinking about it was exhilarating. But Wang Ting knew that if he wanted to raise the space fragment attribute to that level, he would need an enormous number of attribute bubbles. Space attribute bubbles weren't common. Thus, this path wouldn't be as simple as he thought. For a long time, he would be only sitting in the reserve seat. In fact, he might always be a reserve. However, this couldn't dispel Wang Ting's excitement and restlessness. He took a few deep breaths to calm down. He must stop thinking about it. If he continued, he would start daydreaming. Many thoughts flashed through his mind. He glanced at Margus, who was standing opposite him. All of this had happened within a few breaths. Margus was breathing in heavily too, forcing himself to calm down. He glared at Wang Teng and said, "You destroyed my death space. You must die." Wang Teng's face turned cold. He looked at his opponent indifferently as killing intent surged into his heart. He wouldn't show mercy to anyone who was after his life. Arudis from the Taurus Palace and Karl from the Gemini Palace just stopped him. They didn't want to kill him, so he didn't employ his lethal skills. However, Margus. Fros's expression changed when he heard Margus' threat. He shouted, "Margus, Wang Teng is the goddess guest. Don't be disrespectful." "Froze, you're too late." Margus stared straight at Wang Teng and continued angrily, "The death space is the legacy of the Cancer Palace. Nothing must happen to it. Since this fellow destroyed it, I must kill him. I have no face to meet my predecessors. Afterward, I will take my life to atone for my crime." Froze was speechless. He had underestimated Margus' determination. What reason did he have to stop someone who wasn't afraid of death? He felt that things were getting more and more out of hand. What should he do? At this stage, only the goddess could solve this situation. Froze gritted his teeth and left Wang Teng and Margus alone. He rushed out of the Cancer Palace and dashed toward the Holy Temple. Wang Teng and Margus didn't stop him. "The person in the way is gone. Come, let's have a real fight," Margus said. He knew that Wang Ting was a space talent martial warrior and possessed powerful skills. The violent force he used to destroy the death space was the perfect example. But as someone who wasn't afraid of dying, Margus wasn't deterred. Boom! His aura climbing, the force in his body surged out and shot right through the roof of the Cancer Palace. Even his hair was standing erect. His pupils turned extremely deep and profound, seemingly losing their emotions. They were indifferent and holy. If you have problems with this website, please continue reading your novel on our new website myboxnovel.com. Thanks. Boom. The entire Cancer Palace seemed to have sensed his anger. It erupted, and an ancient and powerful aura soared into the clouds. At the same time, in the sky, the Cancer Star, which was 520 light-years away from Earth, suddenly lit up. A profound and divine strength passed through the long distance using some special means and dawned on Earth. The formidable warriors in every corner of Earth felt the dawning of this power. They looked up at the sky with a hint of confusion and astonishment. In an instant, the warriors in every country looked in the direction of North Country Star. They sensed the power landing in that direction. At the same time, the other holy knights in the Zodiac Palaces sprung up in bewilderment. Rushing out of their abodes, they glanced in the direction of the Cancer Palace in unplanned unison. What did that fellow do? How did he force Margus to this stage? Arudis muttered to himself in astonishment. Karl from the Gemini Palace was dumbstruck too. He couldn't remain calm. Who's challenging the palaces? If it was just an ordinary challenger, would Margus need to go so far? Multiple questions appeared in the minds of the holy knights. They were puzzled. Many higher authorities of the Holy Temple at the top of the mountain were alerted. In one of the small halls in the Holy Temple, the great sage ordered, "Go and find out what happened." Yes. Someone received the order and went out. The old great sage seemed worried. He muttered to himself, "Times are changing. Is Mount Saint unable to stay out of this? No, I must see the goddess." He left hurriedly and walked deep into the Holy Temple. At this moment, in the sky above the Cancer Palace, Wang Ting was in front of Margus, so he felt it the most. Margus had turned extremely scary. That power was so terrifying that even he felt had to be vigilant. He raised his head and looked at the sky. There was confusion in his eyes. Boom. Margus moved. He turned into lingering shadows as he shuttled through space and appeared in front of Wang Ting like a ghost. His slender palm chopped down on Wang Ting's head. Die. Die your head. Wang Ting snorted. He wasn't afraid and returned his attack with a punch. Boom. The fist and palm glows collided. Both parties took a few steps back from the impact. The next second, they left behind after images and charged towards each other again. Boom, boom, boom. Explosions rang continuously. Both of them crashed into each other, using their space power to its maximum. After receiving the strength of the star, Margus' space power rose tremendously. It was as if he had received an adrenaline shot. All his attacks were filled with strong power. One punch was enough to cut through space and shatter the air. Ordinary martial warriors wouldn't be able to handle such attacks. However, Wang Ting's space talent had reached an extremely high level. He wasn't afraid of the other party. His attacks were filled with spatial power too. They were formidable and neutralized the space damage of his opponent's attacks. The longer Margus fought, the more serious he became. He was able to execute his space power to this level because of the help of the star, yet Wang Ting was still equal in strength. How monstrous was this youngster? Pant, pant. The two of them separated. As Margus panted, his gaze turned crazy. Suddenly, black light blossomed around his body and spread out. Very soon, it swallowed all the lights around him, and the entire Cancer Palace was plunged into darkness again. What's he planning to do? Wang Ting frowned. Margus disappeared into the darkness. The entire place went silent. Wang Ting sensed something amiss. He glanced around him but didn't notice anything. At this moment, Margus' voice resounded abruptly. Abyss. Burial. His voice echoed as if they were in a valley. Circles of sound waves rebounded continuously. The darkness around them shrunk furiously towards Wang Ting. Darkness was enveloping him. Wang Ting released his force, covering his entire body with emerald-glazed flame to resist the encroaching darkness. However, the darkness shrunk into a black dot and passed through the green flame. It sunk into Wang Ting's forehead. Boom. His mind shook, his body trembled, and even his soul seemed to have shaken out of his body. Nonetheless, a strange force tied around his spirit like a huge mountain suppressing it. His soul refused to budge. Impossible. Margus exclaimed in disbelief. Chapter 633. If I say I'll slash you, I will. It doesn't matter who comes. Wang Ting felt the lingering fear. He got hit just now. If the mysterious power hadn't appeared at the end and pressed his soul down, he didn't dare to think about the consequences. He was vigilant, but he didn't expect Margus to have such skills. He could push one's soul out directly. There were no solutions for this skill. He could only disregard this attack if his ability was much higher than Margus. However, Margus had the help of the star power, so in terms of realms, he was above Wang Ting. Wang Ting could hold his own because he had multiple skills, and his battle ability was indomitable. This was the reason why Margus was in disbelief. As the secret scripture of the Cancer Palace, the Abyss Burial had never failed him. But it had no effects on Wang Teng. His face was filled with confusion. He took a few steps back, unable to believe what had happened. Wang Teng's face turned grim. He stared coldly at Margus and made a move abruptly. Mo Q appeared in his hand with green flames burning around it. Their weapons collided. A ringing sound echoed in the air. Wang Teng compressed the emerald-glazed flame and turned it into a flaming blade glow more than 10 meters long. It slashed through the air, accompanied by an overwhelming blade aura. Margus' face turned pale. The Abyss Burial had used up most of his strength. He was running on fumes now. Hence, in front of the frightening blade glow, he retreated without any hesitation. He did seem fearless of death a moment ago. But when it stared at him in the eye, not many people could maintain their cool. If they didn't have to die, who would want to die? He would rather receive the punishment from the Holy Temple than die in Wang Teng's hands. Thinking of running away? A mocking smile appeared on Wang Teng's face. His gaze was extremely cold. Do you think you can leave? Killing intent was raging all around him. The blade glow on Mo Q had reached the limit. He was about to slash it down. At this moment, a shout was heard from the other side of the passageway in the Cancer Palace. Me. Wang Ting frowned, his movements not pausing for a bit. The person who rushed over yelled when he saw this scene. He was holding a battle sword in one hand and could only slash out a sword glow in haste. It headed straight for Wang Ting's flaming blade glow. Wang Ting's gaze turned sharp. The flaming green blade glow slashed through the air and disappeared on the spot. It traveled through space and landed above Margus' head, chopping it off. Margus looked up. The reflection of the flaming blade glow grew bigger in his pupils. Every single inch of his skin felt the scorching heat from the green flame. How does he have the guts to do this? The thought appeared in his mind. What a joke. If I say I'll slash you, I will. It doesn't matter who comes. Wang Teng snorted as if he could read his mind. Margus was in despair and regret. He only had the time to scream in agony before he got submerged by the flaming blade glow. In the last second of his life, his pupils were filled with green flames. There was nothing else. The green flames spread out and swept through the ground. The person behind couldn't get any closer. On the other side, the sword glow aimed at Wang Ting's flaming blade glow lost its target and went toward him instead. Wang Ting squinted. His fist was covered in light, and the five-element conscious exploded. He met the sword glow head-on. Under his powerful fist aura, the sword glow that was released in a haste cracked and shattered. It couldn't hurt him at all. At the same time, the green flames that were submerging Margus danced wildly in the air before dissipating. The entire ground was burnt. Margus' figure was no longer in sight. Only pieces of broken golden divine constellation armor were seen scattered on the ground, as well as the attribute bubbles floating 3 inches above the ground. The person at the other end of the passageway finally got here. His expression was extremely ugly when he saw this scene. He stared at Wang Ting coldly. The person was around 30 and had golden hair. He was very handsome, and he gave off a fierce and powerful aura. Visit Ria Del. Me for extra chapters. Froze was behind him. He instantly sensed the tense atmosphere between the two people. When he saw the entire process of Margus' death, he knew that he couldn't mitigate this conflict anymore. He felt helpless. He was still a step too late. He looked at Wang Ting in astonishment. This fellow was indeed decisive. He dared to kill a holy knight on Mount Saint. Which martial warrior dared to do this? Wang Teng wasn't worried, though. He ignored the person's deathly glare and swept the attribute bubbles over with his spiritual power. Emperor Realm Enlightenment *268 Ultimate Stage Would Talent *130 Wang Ting's eyes glimmered after he picked up the attribute bubbles. The gains he received from killing this Cancer Palace Holy Knight were not bad. He got 380 points of space attributes, allowing his space attribute to reach 7,632 points in total. He also received 255 points of Emperor Realm Spirit and 268 points of Emperor Realm Enlightenment. Unexpectedly, Margus' Spirit and Enlightenment had reached the Emperor Realm. This was uncommon among general stage martial warriors. Then there were 2,610 wood force attribute. Although Margus was a space talent martial warrior, he also possessed extremely high wood force talent. Wang Ting's wood force was already at the 11-star low-tier general stage. With the additional 2,610 attribute points, his wood force increased again. Wood force, 2960-20,000, 11-star, he even dropped 130 points of ultimate stage wood talent. Without a doubt, as a martial warrior who could become a holy knight, his talent wouldn't be weak. But Wang Ting didn't care about this. His attention was on the abyss burial. Margus almost forced his soul out of his body using this skill. This was enough to prove how extraordinary it was. Also, this was the first time he saw a skill that could attack the soul. At first, he was still wondering how Margus obtained all the souls to put in his space fragment to create the death space. As the abyss burial attribute merged into his body, the relevant information appeared in Wang Ting's mind. The abyss burial was an ancient secret scripture of the Cancer Palace. It was solely passed down to the Holy Knight of the Cancer Palace. This battle technique was linked to the death space of the Cancer Palace, and only its Holy Knight could receive this legacy. Outsiders had no chance to get it. If the martial warriors of Mount Saint obtained this skill, they would be invincible. Yet, Wang Ting still got the skill. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 634. You have no right. Wang Ting's gaze flickered. After comprehending the abyss burial, he realized that this skill had its limit. There were many restrictions too. First, you needed extremely high space talent to cultivate this skill. There was no chance for normal martial warriors to learn it otherwise. Even if they learned it, they would only be able to use it a limited number of times. The origin of soul was needed for every usage, and it wasn't possible to increase the origin of soul through cultivation. Once you executed the abyss burial too many times, no matter how powerful you were, your soul would be destroyed. The souls in the death space weren't obtained solely by Margus. They were an accumulation of all the generations of the Cancer Palace Holy Knights. Unfortunately, with the bug of the system, Wang Ting burned the fruits of the labor of all the generations of Holy Knights into ashes. No wonder Margus hated him to the core and wanted to kill him. This grudge was quite big. Second, abyss burial could only be used on weaker opponents. The greater the difference in ability, the higher the success rate. If the abilities were equal, the chance of failing was high. Margus was able to shake Wang Ting's soul mainly because he took in the star power. His ability had risen exponentially. Also, he went all out and had exhausted his origin of soul to kill him. He didn't leave any escape path for himself. A hint of confusion appeared in Wang Ting's mind. That force that held my soul down, is it the system? He could only think of this possibility. Besides the system, nothing else could curb that invisible and unpredictable attack. System, tell me, is it you? Wang Ting asked in his heart. If it's you, give me some response. We are so close. Don't be so quiet. Come on, tell me. I'll be grateful. All right, you don't have to admit it. Wang Ting felt helpless. The system never made any sound. He wondered if it could speak at all. The moment this complaint arose in his heart, he felt his head turning numb, and a chill ran down his spine. System, I was wrong. Wang Ting immediately admitted his mistake like a coward. How arrogant. You can kill whoever you want. Do you think you can step on Mount Saint's face like this? The golden-haired man was furious at getting ignored. Wang Ting finally turned around and looked at him. He said calmly, respect isn't given by others. You have to earn it. Mount Saint's actions have widened my perspective of the world. The golden-haired man didn't know how to respond. In the end, he said angrily, even if we haven't treated you properly, you didn't have to kill someone. What were you doing when Margus wanted to kill me? Wang Ting sneered. Is taking my life what you meant by not treating me properly? You are good at twisting the facts. The golden-haired man wasn't Wang Ting's match when it came to talking. He was stuck and couldn't find any reasons to refute. He took a deep breath to calm down and continued, "I'm not going to waste time with you. You killed one of our holy knights, so you must stay and receive our punishment." "Punishment? Ha ha ha." Wang Teng laughed. There was contempt on his face. "I'm a martial warrior from country Xia. When is it your turn to punish me?" His expression changed towards the end. He said coldly, "You have no right." Froze, and the golden-haired man's expression changed entirely. The golden-haired man finally remembered that Wang Teng was from country Xia. He had the support of a top nation. Keeping his ability and talent in mind, country Xia must definitely view him with importance. With this background, even if they had the chance, they wouldn't dare to punish Wang Teng easily. The golden-haired man felt exasperated and humiliated. He felt that his dignity was being trampled on by an outsider. With his status, he had never suffered such humiliation. "I really can't touch him." The golden-haired man felt helpless and frustrated. "No, this person killed Margus. He must give Margus an answer. If not, others will think that we are easy to bully." Many thoughts flashed through his mind. In the end, his gaze shimmered, and he said, "Froze, let's take him down together." "Sage Alif." Froze's expression changed as he looked at the golden-haired man. He didn't expect Sage Alif to ignore country Xia's pressure and punish Wang Teng forcefully. "Move!" Alif shouted. The next instant, he vanished and appeared in mid-air. He swung his battle sword down at Wang Teng. A blue ray of sword light lit up the surroundings. Everything seemed to have disappeared from the world, and only this sword ray was left. All the paths of the retreat were locked. There was nowhere to hide. Visit Ria Me for extra chapters. A casual strike from this golden-haired man possessed such a power. This was unbelievable. Very good. Wang Teng laughed in anger. This golden-haired man didn't care who was in the wrong anymore. He was firm on pinning the blame on him. In an instant, the force in his body surged out and soared into the sky. A strong wind blew against Wang Teng's clothes. His black hair danced wildly in the air. Wang Teng had an unruly expression on his face. He glanced at the man from the corner of his eyes arrogantly. "Let's see if you have the ability to take me down." Bellowing in anger, he stepped on the ground, and a frightening force swept through the area. Cracks appeared on the ground like spiderwebs. He shot towards the sky like an arrow leaving its bow. Mo Q swung up violently. An exceptionally sharp golden light crashed into Alif's blue sword light. In an instant, the two sword lights clashed. The two sharp blades collided, releasing sparks in the air. The clang of metals resounded in the air. Alif's pupils constricted. He felt a strong power pushing him in the opposite direction. His hand started hurting from the impact, and even his bones were groaning. Suddenly, a purple light flashed past his face. "Shit!" Alif's expression changed. He retreated hurriedly. A lightning spear came after him. It flew toward him at the speed of light and appeared in front of him in an instant. However, his ability shouldn't be underestimated either. Although the lightning spear came a little unexpectedly, he still managed to stop it with a wave of his sword and shattered it into pieces forcefully. More lightning spears rushed towards him from other directions, surrounding him from all corners. Alif struggled to cope with the onslaught of attacks. Wang Teng was chasing him like a shadow. When he released his fist, the fist glow shot out and energy exploded. He punched continuously. At the same time, the emerald-glazed flame turned into a rope under the control of his spiritual kinesis, trying to entangle Alif. Some of the flames turned into arrows and rained down on him. The moment Wang Teng attacked, it was like a storm. Wang Teng's attack was like a gale. It was exceptionally violent and brutal. There was no stopping it. Alif was stunned by all the attacks. He had been hit by many fire arrows and got injured instantly. He roared like a wild beast uncontrollably. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.